Here.
Member Hall,
Here.
Member Orr,
Here.
Member Ogalski,
Here.
Member Carter is here, Vice President Exum,
Here.
and President Pulaski.
Here, are there any additions, corrections, or modifications to tonight's agenda? No, no. So citizen statements, if there's any citizens present who would like to speak to the board, please fill out a goldenrod sheet and hand it to our recording secretary. We received 4 via email, which I will read presently. The first is from Lily Wells. Hi, my name is Lily Wells, and I am a student at Urbana High School. I heard that there was a proposal for a weapon detector sort of thing, and I'm worried about the support of the students. I personally do not support it. It doesn't make me feel safe. If anything, it makes me worry more. We as students and leaders may feel as though adults do not trust us to be safe. We have never had a school shooting, even though we do have fights. How are we going to be able to trust adults if adults don't trust us? Sincerely, Lily Wells. The next is from Yuli Brishnikov. Dear members of the board, my name is Yuli Brishnikov. I live in Urbana and work at the U of I teaching mathematics there. I am writing to express my strongest concern regarding the quality of the vendor, Systemic Educational Equity LLC, about to be hired to perform the equity audit in our school district. The problems of systemic inequity in our district, county, state are pervasive. There is a strong need to address it and a lot of collective will to do so. There is also a strong trend to attempt to profit off of these trends, ranging from the infamous opportunity zones created by the Trump tax legislature to the proliferation of the for-profit companies conducting equity audits. By itself, the emergence of a cottage equity audit industry is not bad. What is wrong is that a wave of unquestioning support is misused by the merchants of questionable products. And the output of Systemic Educational Equity LLC is substandard by any measure. I had a chance to read through and compare several audits performed by the company. What they have in common: poorly worded theoretical justification sections, verbatim copied across the reports. These sections are rich on motivational slogans and extremely short on tying the current theoretical research on inequities in education, their roots, and ways to address them. Polls with slight variations of canned questions failing to fine-tune to special social or economic circumstances of each district. Pages and pages of tables and plots lifted from the district or state data sites, often corrupted in the process. Remarkably similar across the report's findings and recommendations, which again fail to address any specific social, demographic, cultural specificity of the districts. Absence of any statistical analysis, and I do not mean computing means and deviations, an analysis that would help to help, not to make declarative statements or commitment. What differs? Amounts of money paid for those reports, but always comfortably in the tens of thousands of dollars. I would be happy to provide to this board a detailed report of the systemic failings of systemic educational equity to do a minimally acceptable job. However, even a cursory inspection of the company's output by the board would show that retaining that vendor would divert resources to vacuous proclamations paid for by me and my fellow taxpayers at the time of multiple crises the district experiences. I urge the board to stop the process and to conduct a competitive bidding if the board is unable to engage abundant resources of the professoriate living in Urbana and eager to help. Otherwise, we are engaging in an open, preventable misuse of public funds. The next is from Ruth Kantorowicz. Dear members of the board, my name is Dr. Kantorowicz, and I have been a resident of Urbana for over 15 years. The following comments are on the consulting firm Systemic Educational Equity LLC that you are considering hiring to conduct an equity audit and consultation. Selection of this consulting firm violated board policy 4:60 and the state law. An equity audit is an expenditure that exceeds $25,000 and therefore needs to comply with the state law on bidding procedure Although contracts for professional services are exempt from the standard bidding procedure and selection is based on qualifications, competence, good fit, and reasonable price, the state law still requires solicitations of proposals and a competitive selection process. In this case, the superintendent did not solicit proposals for the contract. Systemic Educational Equity LLC was the only consulting firm considered by the Equity Task Force. The cost of the audit was not revealed to the task force. However, public records show that this consulting firm charged a similarly sized school district $37,500 to conduct an equity audit. Public records also show that other school districts, such as North Shore School District 112, did follow the request for proposal process for their equity audit. 2, Systemic Educational Equity LLC produces unacceptable, low quality, and unprofessional equity audit reports. Publicly available equity audit reports done by this consulting firm show that their data analysis is merely a collection of tables from the district's databases converted to bar charts with unlabeled y-axis followed by naive interpolations of the data. Naive interpretations of the data. Their analysis neglects even the most basic statistics such as standard deviation and fails to recognize what is statistically significant. In several instances, when the data was not in support of their desired outcome of showing inequity, the data analysts used statistical tricks such as inappropriately combining groups to reach their desired conclusion. This consulting firm has no track record showing that their equity action plans were successful in other school districts. 4, the superintendent proposed to use Title II funds to pay for the equity audit and the action plan consultation service. Shouldn't the district use Title II funds for more urgent Title II needs that are now amplified by the pandemic? And finally, the last is from Principal Nance, statement on weapons detection equipment. After participating in the demo of the weapons detection equipment, I believe that this is a necessary step as we elevate our preventative efforts school-wide. UHS has been active in developing preventative measures to ensure the safety and security of our campus. As we continue to build a positive school culture and climate, safety and security included, the academic, behavioral, and social-emotional success for all students is likely to increase. The weapon detection system is sleek and has the same connotation as the theft equipment used at many retail stores. I have been actively engaging students in conversations regarding safety and security. Students want increased security and safety measures. Parents want increased safety and security measures. Our staff wants increased security and safety measures. As we enter our fall-winter seasons, the ability to identify large weapons prior to entering our building is essential to the product of Urbana High School student success. It is my hope that after your examination of the weapons detection software, you too will understand its preventative value, which sometimes is hard to quantify. That is, until we are without it and an incident occurs. The same value we place on car insurance, health insurance, and life insurance is exactly the value I have placed on the deployment of preventative measures that will keep our entire school community safe. Thank you for your consideration, Principal Nance. Does anyone wish to address the board? All right, that's the end of our citizen statements for tonight. There is no call for an executive session after tonight's meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Our first section is accommodations of recognition. So we're 7.1. We're going to recognize our school district employees who have served in the armed forces.
Yes, so this is, I don't believe, a few of them indicated they would come in person, but I don't see any of them here. So we will pass their acknowledgement on through the school mail, or I'll deliver it in person. So typically, as a district, because I think Randy, something pulled out, sorry. We are in school on Veterans Day, and we usually plan Veterans Day activities to commemorate not just our staff that are veterans, but also all of our people in our community. So that will be a little different this year because of COVID. So Catherine is collecting that information from schools. So we'll make sure that we share out how our buildings are planning to commemorate the day. But we always take a few minutes at the board meeting prior to Veterans Day to acknowledge our staff members and their service. So I'll just read their names. Patricia McFall, Urbana Middle School. She's a building-based substitute who served in the Army. Daniel Lance from Urbana High School. He is in the Department of Facilities, but he is the building custodial manager. He served in the Navy. Patrick Russell, Urbana Middle School, associate principal, served in the Army. Elizabeth Chin from King Elementary. She's an early childhood teaching assistant who also served in the Army. James Robert McCune from Leal School, PE teacher, United States Navy. Nathan Watson, Urbana High School, driver education teacher, US Navy. So thank you to all of our staff for all of their service and everything that they've done. So, yeah.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
service to our country and to our district. First up tonight is our policy review. We have a policy proposal to allow for student ambassadors.
Absolutely. So these have been shared with the students. So board members, you've seen these, their drafts. The Student Ambassador Program is up and going. We're so excited. I have checked in and we have a couple of applications already turned in, and students who are currently working on completing their applications with staff members that are assisting in the process. Applications, parents and students listening tonight are due Friday at noon. So if you're working diligently, or if you need assistance, let us know. We want to have a wealth of applications to review next week. So board members, in front of you, you have two items. The first is the actual press policy. So this is language that press has actually put together. It has the legal reference from the school code and board policy related directly to student ambassador programs. In our, right now, we are kind of in a odd dilemma because we didn't start this as we normally would in the spring. So in the future, our goal will be that we do this, the process that we're in the middle of right now will happen in the springtime. We'll open up the applications in April. We will have selected our student ambassadors before the end of the school year. And our future plan is to swear our student ambassadors in at the first board meeting in September. I know that's not what we're doing this year, but I wanted the new policy to reflect our practice moving forward, which is why it says the student ambassadors will be sworn in at the first board meeting in September. The other document that you have is the administrative procedures. So this is what the teacher group, I have some staff members from UHS who are serving as the application review board. The interviews will happen at the board level, hopefully at the end of next week. So the students were given the administrative procedures, and this is what they have been kind of asking questions about. So selection of the ambassadors will be as follows. Again, we'll start in April. Right now, we have a selection team from UHS, a variety of teachers and administrators who have volunteered to do that. Finalists will reflect the diversity, ethnicity, and economic range of the school and or district. Finalists will be reviewed by 2 board members and the superintendent. And a final recommendation will be made to the board in June prior to the last meeting. It also goes into detail about what the student ambassadors will be responsible for. One of the biggest things they'll be responsible for is attending regular meetings. I attached the meeting schedule for this year, so our current student ambassadors understand the expectations. One of the things that the high school team brought up was that there will be certain times of the year that it might be difficult for our students to be here until 10, 11 o'clock at night. So they wanted to make sure that we would have a little grace You know, if it might be finals time, or if we have a senior, all the seniors just turned in, all the people applying early admission just turned in their applications November 1st. So there may be times during the year where one or both of them may not be able to be here, and they wanted to make sure we understood that. One of the other things that they brought up was that it might be a good idea for us to have an alternate. So that's something that we could talk about as well. The group actually really wanted to see the number of applications that we get. If we do have several students and it is a really hard decision, we're creating a rubric, and so they'll get rated, and it's going to be it's pretty official. So the teachers are really putting it together. That there might be a third student that we would offer the opportunity to be an alternate. Several other things that the students will do is they'll be expected to communicate with their peer group, represent the students, sharing information back and forth. When they're here in board meetings, they will be a direct source of information for the board and able to provide a student perspective, answer questions, reviewing the board packets. One thing that the teachers also thought might be helpful for students is when we do put out the board packet, there's a lot of information, as board members know. So I will, when those board packets go out, kind of reach out to the students, make sure they know these are the areas that you really should pay attention to. The board might ask you questions about this, just to prep them a little bit, so they don't have to read through hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents sometimes, that they will be aware of the things that are most relevant to the student viewpoint, I guess. And then the rest of the administrative procedures is really just talking about the process for participation. So how they will interact and share information. Student ambassadors will not join closed sessions. They will not vote on agenda items. They will be here to share their viewpoint, share their perspective, comment, and of course, answer questions and concerns from the board.
Are there any questions about either the policy or the administrative procedures?
My only comment is also just kind of ensuring that their role within the school is also known, so that
Oh, absolutely.
as students are trying to figure out how to communicate with the board, they understand who that liaison board representative is in some fashion, and that person also has the authority to take on maybe some of these student inquiry based questioning that we are trying to seek, and not maybe administrators, that
Sure.
sort of falls into their jurisdiction.
We actually have a question about that on the essay. There's an essay question. You know, if think about a current issue for UHS, how are you going to communicate that to the students? How are you going to collect feedback? So we're interested in hearing their ideas about that. So yes, there also is, I think, an interview question that outlines that as well. So.
I had a couple. One was, are we setting term limits for them, or is it just a one-year thing?
1
Because you already
year.
mentioned that. I'm sorry.
Yes, 1 year term is what we have in administrative procedures right now.
Okay. And also, is there going to be some sort of orientation or training for the kids? I mean, I know that we tried working with Derek Peterson in the past. I don't know if he's still
Sure.
someone who's consulting with us, but when Laura mentioned that about being a liaison between the kids, of knowing what types of things they can communicate. And I mean, I don't know if are they subjected to the OMA the same way we are? I mean, those are
I
the
think
sorts
their
of
role
questions.
will be more so like our student who shared the comment tonight about the door detection. A great activity for a student ambassador would be to take that conversation back to the high school, maybe sit in the lunchroom and walk around and poll students, and maybe have a couple focus groups where they can gather, like basically what Laura's saying. They can be our student voice in the space. So we're not always sending out surveys, or, you know, I'm not walking around talking to students. And Mr. Nance, they'd be able to have a student to student interaction. So.
And there will be, you think there's
Yes,
some
we
sort of
will-
orientation?
We can train them. I think Derek is not won't be doing as much in person,
Mhm.
so we could maybe set up a Zoom.
Mhm.
So I think that'd be a great idea.
He might
Yeah.
also have a lot of materials that he could share with
I
us.
tried to get materials, but he said he has not written his book yet.
Oh,
So COVID kind of halted that because that was one of the things John Dennis
Mhm.
said before he left is Derek wrote a book, get his book. Well, we tried to get his book and he hasn't written it. So
come on.
there you go. But I have reached out to several districts. So what you kind of see in front of you
Mhm.
is a collaboration of other districts that are doing this. So Peoria, Decatur, Champaign have student ambassadors. So
Okay. Thank you. I'm really excited to get this
I
rolling
am
finally.
too.
Any other questions?
Just a couple of little wording things also,
Sure.
and I share the same, that I want to just make sure that there's, formalized processes for the students to be able to, part of this is number 4, where it says representing all students, which is a very, very difficult thing to achieve for any 1 or 2 students. So that they really are getting a chance to formally talk with different members of their peer group. The other language issue is number 3 at the top. Finalists will reflect the diversity range of the school. And I see we've identified ethnicity and economic range. I don't know what the application pool looks like, but given that it says it will represent the range, I think we may want to tweak that language to broaden what we're considering diversity, for one, and making sure that we're not overselling what's possible if you get 2 applicants or something
Sure.
like this.
Sure, yeah. Good suggestion. What would your suggestion for representing all students? I think that is just meant to be very broad, that their role does kind of represent all students. They're the students' voice here when the students are not here, of course.
I would add the words will attempt,
We'll attempt.
because
Perfect.
with 2 students, you cannot represent the diversity of the student body,
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Both
or will
3
strive.
and
3
Four.
and
Oh my God.
4.
I think is what, right? It's like the diversity piece and the like representation piece.
Other wordsmithing or? So the goal is, as I think you've probably seen this in print, but I wanted to say it out loud, is that we would have the student ambassadors join us for the first time at the November 16th business meeting. Their oath is right out of the press on the back of the administrative procedure. So they actually take an official oath when they're here. And the interviews are being set up for next week. And I think that is it.
But I had one more.
Oh, a question, sorry.
Sorry, saving mine for last. Just thinking through procedurally, do we need to have a clause in there if, say, 1 or both of the students move or decide they don't want to do it anymore, and how to fill this midterm?
Oh, yeah, I guess we could, yeah. In the
Okay.
administrative procedures, I guess,
Yeah.
instead of in the policy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. That was the only comment I had.
Okay.
I guess I was talking to you last night, but I was thinking, besides having this, as an option for a student voice, we should consult both the ambassador and Principal Nance for formalized ways in which we could go into the building and hear from a broader group of students as well, instead of just this forum. I think having a dialogue requires, both directions. So it'd be nice if we could think about that as a possible goal too. So anyway, any other questions? Great. Moving on to our study topics. The first is our equity audit overview. Dr. Ivory Tatum and Dr. Caffey.
Dr. Cappy's in Zoom. And I don't think I said this last time Dr. Caffey joined us via Zoom. Dr. Caffey lives about 45, 50 minutes away. So when we have these long meetings, to have him get in the car and drive an hour away. So it's just easier for him to join us via Zoom right now, if that's okay. So, all right. So Dr. Caffey, we are going to talk a little bit before we invite our consultant in. So as you heard via a couple of public comments that we received tonight, well, those are the only comments that we received. I did ask Dr. Caffey to share a little background information about how we arrived at bringing Dr. Dubiel forward tonight. She did meet with Dr. Caffey and I after some due diligence on his part, which he will talk about in a few minutes. And then we invited her to our last Equity Task Force meeting, which everyone at the Equity Task Force was grateful for her presentation, eager to work with her, and excited about moving the work forward. So just to address the two public comment questions that we received related to Dr. Dubiel's work, I thought it would be more appropriate to have that conversation prior to her joining us. So she will be in the waiting room shortly. She teaches class in the evening, so 8 o'clock was around a good time for her to jump into our meeting. So that's why we have her first tonight, so she can join us and then move on to her class that she has to teach this evening. So Dr. Caffey, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you share a little bit about the process. And then I'll have you introduce Dr. Dubiel before she pops in and joins us.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ivory Tatum, and thank you to the board for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. And so I have actually prepared a statement, so I'm just going to read my statement that I pre-prepared. At the onset of my hiring as the Director of DEI in August of this year, I immediately engaged in conversations with Superintendent Dr. Ivory Tatum about the pros and cons of conducting an internal equity audit versus an external one. As we contemplated between the two scenarios, I centered our conversation around two essential questions. One, do we have the internal experience, knowledge, and overall capacity to conduct a robust equity audit? And two, who is the intended audience of the equity audit? Based on our initial conversations, Dr. Ivory Tatum and I presented to the Equity Task Force the identifiable pros and cons to both ends. After some debate, it was the consensus of the Equity Task Force that we did not have the internal capacity to conduct a robust internal equity audit. Even in my role as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and years of experience as a school administrator, my professional background and strengths are not rooted in conducting mixed methods educational equity audits, which are essential to a proper audit. If tasked with the responsibility of leading the district through an internal audit, I can confidently say that I would need and request the assistance of a consultant to assist me in a research-based process, effectively delaying our timeline to complete an audit and essentially conducting an external audit by default. Based on the feedback of the Equity Task Force to move forward with an external audit process, I was assigned the task of vetting potential consultants. In doing so, I utilized my cohort of in-state DEI directors to compile a list of equity consultants. This cohort of DEI directors include individuals working in the Chicago Public Schools, Chicagoland suburbs, Rockford, Peoria, Bloomington Normal, Springfield, Edwardsville, Alton, O'Fallon, and as south as Carbondale. The cohort produced an initial list of 20 in-state and out-of-state equity auditors. They were screened against their research-based frameworks and direct experiences working with public school organizations. From the initial list of 20, the group eliminated 13 as viable firms as they could not provide evidence of working with school organizations and/or did not respond to the cohort when contacted for additional information in respect to their audit process. From the list of 7 remaining potential auditing firms, I vetted them against the established criteria. 1, the structure and components of the audit process and the theoretical foundation of which their research is based upon. And of great importance to us and Urbana School District, would the auditing firm be willing to commit to coming on site during the process? 2, the duration of the process in regards to weeks, months, or a potential year to complete the audit. 3, how many other public school districts have utilized their audit process in respect to the diversity, size, and scope of USD 116? 4, the anticipated financial investment. And 5, the outcomes and/or final report produced by the consultant. At the conclusion of my process, I emerged with two potential auditing firms. The first and leading firm was the Illinois-based equity firm, Systemic Equity LLC. The second was an out-of-state firm, out-of-state-based firm, Equity and Educational Partners. During the continual vetting process, however, it was learned that I am a childhood acquaintance of one of the primary owners. Based on that discovery, the firm self-eliminated from consideration as not to cause any assertions of conflict of interest, to which I agreed. It was at this time an invitation was extended to Dr. Yvette Dubiel, founder of Systemic Equity LLC, to present to the Equity Task Force concerning the auditing process. Dr. Dubiel presented in detail the 5 phases of her auditing process and the accountability framework of her work based on the 5 strands of 1, systems, 2, teaching and learning, 3, student voice, climate and culture, 4, professional learning, and 5, family and community as agency. In the spirit of full transparency, I explained to the task force then and reiterate to the board now that I first became familiar with Dr. Dubiel when serving as an administrator in the McLean County Unified School District. In 2020 and 2021, I was part of a series of professional development that she conducted for our building-based school administrators. While Dr. Dubiel's firm was hired by McLean County Unified to conduct their equity audit, it is important to note that I was not a part of the team that vetted her organization for hire. I was not a member of the district equity leadership team that worked with her during the process, nor did I participate in any of the focus groups held during the auditing activities. More so, I had resigned from McLean County Unit 5 and began working for USD 116 by the time Systemic Equity LLC concluded its audit and provided its final report to their Board of Education. This is important to note for anyone or any entity that might speculate about the nature of our relationship and or affiliation with one another, as I, a representative of our task force, prepared to bring her forward to the Board of Education for a presentation. With that being said, I will now pause for any questions before officially introducing Dr. Dubiel.
Board, any questions for Dr. Caffey? There are none.
All right. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to some and reintroduce to others Dr. Yvette Dubiel. She is the founder, CEO, and Chief Equity Officer of Systemic Educational Equity, LLC, a full-service diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm. Systemic Educational Equity, LLC offers a wide range of customized services for public and parochial school districts, nonprofits, and corporations. The most sought-after services include comprehensive and customized equity audits, equity action plans, and a series of professional development and training opportunities. A former classroom teacher and school administrator, Dr. Dubiel became the first Director of Educational Equity for Indian Prairie School District 204. She has also served as an executive director of equity at a county-level organization. Recently, Dr. Dubiel was selected to be a part of the Community Leadership and Equity Advisory Council for U.S. Representative Lauren Underwood. As the first-generation high school and college graduate in her family, Dr. Dubiel also serves as an adjunct professor at 2 universities. Dr. Dubiel teaches undergraduate and graduate level courses on diversity and social justice, critical transformative leadership, and a series of foundational theories of pedagogy and practices to serve diverse student populations. She is the founder of the Illinois Coalition of Educational Equity Leaders. She was also the founding president of the Illinois Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. Currently serving on the diverse learner and teacher-ready network for the Illinois State Board of Education, I welcome and present to you Dr. Yvette Dubiel.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction. Appreciate it. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. All right, so I believe I have some slides to share. Brandon, will you be sharing screen or should I go ahead and do so?
if you're able to do so, I'm not sure. I'm not on site, so I'm not sure if our IT director
Gotcha.
has them or not.
Happy to do so.
Yeah, they're up now.
Oh, okay, they're up. All right. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It is a pleasure to meet with you. As stated, my name is Yvette Dubiel, and I lead the Systemic Educational Equity LLC. So for this evening, I will provide some information about the equity audit. Feel free to ask questions throughout. And I will also provide you a little bit of information about equity action plans and professional learning that your community may be interested in. So if we can go to the second slide. So the equity audit process is an opportunity to use a mixed method approach, both qualitatively and quantitatively, to determine every aspect, district-wide systemically, what the equity audit uncovers. The outcome of the equity audit is to eventually develop a plan. That plan is going to be deeply rooted in the accountability framework that Brandon alluded to earlier. And the equity audit in itself is absolutely a proactive opportunity for an organization to identify areas of strength and needed improvement when it comes to equity, pays attention to all students with particular attention to historically marginalized groups. If we can go to the next slide. So the equity audit for a school district, it ranges for organizations, but for a school district, it is a 9 to 12-month process, and there are 5 phases to it. The first phase involves the district assembling what is known as a district equity leadership team. We call it DELT for short. The district can call it what they deem appropriate. They're given some guidance as to how many members should be on the team, who should be on the team. And the purpose of this is because every equity audit should be customized for the organization it is serving. So once those critical stakeholders are identified, we meet during phase 1. During phase 1, there are 3 major tasks that need to be accomplished. The first one is the team completes a needs assessment. This needs assessment will allow for the team to identify where they feel they are at as a system in relation to equity. They'll be evaluating themselves in 10 components against a rubric. Also, during phase 1, the team will decide the quantitative and qualitative direction of the audit. Again, this audit utilizes a mixed method approach. So during phase 1, the team receives a list of data considerations. There's about 30 different pieces of data, and they will decide which pieces of data they feel the district should collect and synthesize and then be submitted so it could be analyzed with an equity lens. That data often is multiple year data, so we can identify trends. And we also ask for data that we could disaggregate by identity as well as intersectionality of identity. So they tend to have really robust conversations on the data that they believe is helpful. Finally, during phase 1 is the team deciding what questions to ask the stakeholders. So we do identify the stakeholders during phase 1. That will often be determined on which package, if you will, an organization chooses for the equity audit. There's some flexibility based on cost factors and some time factors, but each of the equity audits, whatever you choose, there is the expectation of conducting focus groups. So typically, focus groups involve 3 major stakeholders: students, staff, parents, guardians, community members. So again, this district equity leadership team will receive a bank of questions that could be asked of the different stakeholder groups, but they're not limited to those questions. It provides them an opportunity of what they really want to gather from their stakeholders. We do go over the logistics of a stakeholder, of a focus group, who participates, how long does each focus group take. They really, again, have some comprehensive dialogue about what questions, what information they would like to solicit from the stakeholders. It's much more meaningful when those focus groups actually take place, that participants in a focus group understand that these questions come from their district team, not the auditor. After phase 1, all of those tasks are completed during phase 1. Then phase 2 and phase 3 occur simultaneously. Phase 2 is the district is now gathering all that data that they were agreed upon during phase 1. So they do receive a template from me where they will essentially upload that data onto the template. And that will take the district several months to gather and synthesize. And then simultaneously, the focus groups are taking place during that time. Those focus groups can occur in a number of different platforms. I've done them virtually via Zoom, I've done them on site, or I've done a combination. Um, then after that, phase 4 is where my team analyzes all the data. It's been collected and it's completely independent of the district. And then finally, phase 5 is the report that's submitted to the district with the findings and the recommendations based on the quantitative and qualitative data. Now, in the report, it will be quite comprehensive. It will include the results of the needs assessment that was taken during phase 1. It will include the details as far as how many participants were involved in the stakeholder groups, how many stakeholder groups actually participate. It will have all the data that has been submitted by the district, and not every data is necessarily going to identify an inequity, but if it's submitted, it will most likely be in the report because it's still meaningful, valuable information for the organization to have. It will also include some quotes extracted from the focus groups that fall into the accountability framework. So the final recommendation, the final section of the report will include findings. Those findings will already be organized using an accountability framework. You can go to the next slide. So the accountability framework is something that we have developed that very much grounded on research that when it comes to an organization, specifically for our case, a school district to advance equity, there is not one pillar or core that the school district should focus on. It's not just about teaching and learning. It's not just about systems, but holistically, it's a number of entities that make what we know as school districts are very complex systems that make it important to be very thoughtful and deliberate to systemically move that equity needle forward in a systemic approach. So the accountability framework utilizes the 5 strands of systemic equity. I believe there's a slide for that. And I certainly will read through each of these for you, but I'd be happy to provide some examples. So you could imagine in the report, there'll be some recommendations on their systems. Maybe those recommendations will be, well, does the district have a definition of equity? Typically, that's what we consider a classic finding. If the district doesn't, we probably would want to start there. Right? That would come out in the equity audit. The district needs to define it and communicate it widely to their stakeholders. So that would be a finding under systems. Another finding of our systems, which is also considered a classic one, is our HR practices, our recruitment efforts to recruit qualified, diverse staff. Teaching and learning. Some of the findings that would be there that could range from our instructional programs, making sure that we have robust programming for some of our most marginalized identities, like multiple language students, special education students, that we have rigor. We don't compromise rigor, but we also examine the access to rigorous programming, culturally responsive practices and pedagogy, formative assessments that help support summative assessments. So those type of findings would be organized under teaching and learning. Student voice, climate, culture, findings under there will relate often to discipline, the need for developing some type of student voice opportunity or entity to provide us for consistent dialogue in how we're doing with equity, allow us to take a pulse on equity on a more consistent basis. Professional development or professional learning. There is no end to this learning. The paradigms of equity are complex and they're very deeply rooted in a number of systems and structures, and there's a lot. And people are at very different places when it comes to equity. So building a structure to provide common language, common understanding, foundational understanding regarding equity, making sure onboarding during our onboarding process with new staff, after all the other staff has had some common language, that new staff, we catch them up, if you will, on that understanding, providing opportunities for staff to self-select so they continue to build their capacity, ensuring that all of our programming for our marginalized identities, again, multiple language, special education, that our staff and our community understands the nuances of these programs. So those would fall under professional learning. And then last but certainly not least is family and community as agency. We can't do this work alone, so tapping into our families and community as agencies. So sometimes the classic findings, again, that come out of an equity audit is maybe there's a need and we see that there is a lack in translating documents that need to be translated on a more regular basis for our multiple language families, creating a family entity, if you will, or family arm of the district equity leadership team to continue to build our work, to think creatively and outside of the box, to engage members of the community. So all those findings, whatever findings that come out, they will be already organized in that accountability framework. It provides a user-friendly packaged way for the district to understand that when it comes to equity systemically, each one of these strands, these pillars, these cores, however one refers to it, is absolutely necessary. One is not important than the other, but systemically, if we are devoted to moving that equity needle forward, we have to have actions and systems in teaching and learning, student voice, climate culture, and professional learning, and family and community as agency. I know that I wanted to mention, if it's all right, a little bit about the equity action plan and professional learning, and then I'll take some questions. I don't think I have a slide for that, so I apologize. So the equity action plan. The equity action plan is different from the equity audit. It is an opportunity for the district to develop a plan that allows for strategic, measurable ways to identify the actions that they are doing to move the equity needle forward. Oftentimes, districts pursue the equity action plan following the equity audit. The equity audit findings can be overwhelming, and there's going to be perhaps quite a few. There's never been less than 5, and it can be overwhelming, and just identifying, where do we start? What is our priority? That's where the equity action plan can be very helpful if the district pursues this route. And that's where we come back again, and this is where we bring back and we reconvene the district equity leadership team. That team would come together and we review the report. We answer any questions that come out as a result of the equity audit, and then we identify priorities. We look at the findings and we decide what is important. What can we accomplish year 1? What can we possibly accomplish year 2? So we adopt the accountability framework and we list what those findings are. So the team will be identifying those actions, those steps, the measures, the accountability, and every objective, what we call objective, every action that they identify must be aligned to something that already exists. So it must be aligned to a board policy. It must be aligned to the strategic plan if the district has one, the district mission and boards, even nuances that are related to teacher contracts. So every objective we come up with must be aligned to something that already exists. It'll further ground the work and the movement that we are aiming to have. So our equity action plan can have the recommendations of the equity audit, which usually does, but the equity audit is not sometimes all-encompassing finding a reality of some of the work. It may not capture everything that we need to do. So the equity action plan also provides an opportunity to identify areas of needed improvement that should be included in the equity action plan. So working with the team and identifying what is realistic, feasible for year 1, what is realistic, feasible year 2. So there's a process in working with the team to identify those pieces and create that action. Think of it as a SMART plan, but a lot more sophisticated in a sense. There's more elements to the actual plan, and the template is quite robust, quite comprehensive. And then finally, the professional learning. So districts are very much not just districts, but many organizations are very much at a different place. And when it comes to equity, it's a complex paradigm of social justice. It's a complex reality of doing some unlearning in understanding what equity is, tenets related to equity. What is these transformative shifts that we expect organizations and structures to consider? So because people are at different places and people will be at different places, people develop their own learning and in different ways, which is wonderful. I do believe personally that it is important to have some common language regarding equity. What is it? What is it not? What is implicit bias? What are microaggressions? How does it manifest in greater society? How could it manifest in the classroom? So professional learning, there is an equity series that I've developed over some time and have facilitated a really ridiculous amount of time, have facilitated quite a bit. And if your district decides to pursue this, again, knowing that staff is at a different place, so that the learning is the same. What is always going to be unique is the conversations that come out of it. So the benefits of that professional learning, that professional development, it's a pretty complex series, is that we do walk away with some common understanding, some common foundational knowledge about equity, some that really ground us to then deep dive later on based on our interest or where we are at personally in understanding and building our capacity towards equity. So the series itself is a 9-hour series, and it has been facilitated in a wide range of platforms, from thousands of people meeting with them 1 hour a month at different times to get the 9 hours done within a year, to meeting with some folks in cohort style, 3 hours here, 3 hours there, 3 hours there to complete the 9 hours. So the nuance and the logistics of that is something that could absolutely be ironed out, but it's an opportunity if there are organizations that are maybe starting out, or organizations that are not necessarily starting out, but feel that it is important to have common language on equity for all staff. So when I'm talking to school districts, we're talking all staff, teachers, paraprofessionals, support staff, food service, transportation, all means all. It can be very meaningful. It can be powerful to have that systemic approach to development and the understanding. And the way the series is designed, it is not exclusive for teachers. It is broad enough to make it very personal and developing where people are at and understanding equity. We've also done it for board members as well, and for community members down the road, if that's something that the district is interested in pursuing. Whew. All right, so the last slide is questions.
Board members, any questions? Brian?
Yep, I'll start. I assume she's still there, but just behind the question. All right. I wonder, you mentioned that you have 30 unique pieces of quantitative data that you would float to the team. And I'm wondering if you could give us some tangible examples of what those sources of data would look like.
Sure. So the data, I will ask the team, they will always have to gather data that's multiple year data so we can identify trends anywhere from 3 to 5 years, depending on it is. But the data would range from the demographic of our students to the discipline in school, out of school suspension, even office referrals. We know that in school and out of school suspension is what we have to report to the state. But if we have some data on students who are getting office referrals, being sent to the dean's office, that could be important information. The students participating in our gifted program, honors and AP. For high school level, it may be students who are in our CTE programs, our graduation rate, our absences, our truancies, our tardies, the students in our multiple languages, the students who are receiving special education, what type of special education, all of that data also disaggregated by the identities that we have to report to the state: race, gender, and subgroups. This state calls it subgroups, we call it special populations. So multiple languages, special education, and free and reduced lunch. We also ask for intersectionality of that identity. So what that means is identities where students would qualify for multiple identities. And why this is really important is if we have limited resources, and what organization doesn't, right? Have limited resources, we have the evidence, if you will, to devote resources to this. So let's say, for example, we look at our discipline data and we notice our in-school discipline data, a lot of boys are receiving in-school discipline data. Well, let's go a little bit further by the intersectionality of identity with gender and race. And we notice that it's our Latinx boys that are receiving a huge amount of in-school discipline data. Let's disaggregate that further. We notice it's our Latinx boys who are also free and reduced lunch. If they represent a huge proportion of our discipline data and in-school suspension, then we have the fuel, the evidence, if you will, to dedicate resources to mitigate that and find out, get to the root problem of why that is the case. So not only general data by the titles, but but then to disaggregate that data by those identities that we have to report to the state, and then to take it further by taking those identities by the intersectionality identities will give us the evidence, that the tools that we need to focus on any particular group if we need to do that.
Any other
Oh,
questions?
I forgot the date. There's so much data. I forgot to mention grades. We disaggregate grades. We look at standardized assessment. No. Lot to say about that. But yeah, we look at a wide range of data. Sorry, just wanted to mention that.
I guess I had a question, and then the idea of, you'd kind of mentioned data collecting methods as a pretty general term that the DELT team would kind of be facilitating. And I guess my question is, to what degree does your organization kind of lead that charge versus the group that the district is putting together as the DELT team, saying that maybe doesn't have quite the experience of putting together like data collection methods? So it kind of sounded like you were presenting it in a way where it was like, hey, choose some data collection methods, but I'm assuming there's more support or clarity on what you're actually providing.
Yeah, so the team is not choosing the method of data. The team is choosing the data. We are conducting the data analysis. My firm is conducting it, not the team. The team is deciding which data pieces. Yeah, that's interesting data. Let's get that. Let's get that. That's what they're deciding as a team, that they would like for whoever is going to be responsible at the district level to collect that data during phase 2. So what often comes out of phase 1 is district equity leadership teams look at that long list of data and they get very ambitious and they say, yeah, let's collect it all. This will be great data. Let's collect it all. And then whoever it is or whatever team it is during phase 2 that's actually collecting the data, they may, and this has happened, the data is not as clean as they had hoped. It's not as available as they had hoped, but the team is, they themselves are not doing anything specific with the data. They're not rolling up their sleeves, analyzing their data. They're just agreeing which data needs to be collected. We do the analysis of the data.
Right. And then I guess my other question was, do you have any current examples of action items that have been like put into place that have been successful?
Are you referring to equity action plans?
Correct.
Yes. So on my on my website, you can see all the different districts that I have. There's a multitude. So it would be a challenge to name any, only because you could see all of them. You can see all the districts I do, and they're not all listed there, but all the districts I've done equity audits for, all the districts I've done equity action plan. Many of them, including one that Brandon mentioned, McLean, they're deep into their equity action plan. The equity action plan, to be clear, is not a one and done. It is a consistent, continuous involvement. So there are districts that have been in the plan for a couple of years. As districts are committed to carry out the plan, they will be successful. What is going to be unique for every district is the movement in the plan, is how slow a plan will be, the hiccups along the way, because their objective, one district's objective is going to be different from another district's objective. No two districts will have the exact same plan. It needs to be customized for the district. Not only is the demographic and the makeup and the structure of the district unique, it's always going to have to do with 100% of a organization's community. So by community, I refer to students, staff, and parents, guardians, caretakers. So how progressive, if you will, plan will have to do with where the community is at, the history behind what work has been done. There are districts that have been doing this work for 15 years. So their equity action plan is very, very robust. And there are districts that could be identical in your structure, in your demographic, and they're 5 years in, but it's going to be different because you may be first year in. You can have a neighboring district that have plans. And I do have districts that are neighboring districts and their plans could not be any different. So all that to say, I have evidence of multiple organizations that are deep into their plan, and it's as successful as the team is willing to do the work and support the work.
Any further questions for Avi?
I got a question. So based off your answer to the last question, I'm a little confused here because if the DELT team is deciding what data we're analyzing and all you're doing is analyzing the data, what do you bring to the table other than, couldn't we just hire a statistician to do this? You know?
Yeah. I mean, I can answer that. I think the difference is I'm also conducting the focus group. So I'm also using quantitative and qualitative data. I can't, I mean, certainly you could go any direction you want, but you want to be sure whatever direction you do go, it's grounded on somebody who knows their scholarship regarding equity.
Yeah, I mean, so that's what I'm thinking, is that the idea of having an outside consultant is to say, these are the important data points you should be looking at. Because if you're just asking the system here to look at it, you're basically bringing the bias of the system here to analyze itself. You know, so that is the whole idea of doing an outside audit, I believe, and not an inside audit. But this is basically what you're proposing sounds like an inside audit under the veil of being an outside audit.
I don't know if I agree with that, and maybe I'm not explaining it, but the team is only deciding which data pieces. The team often doesn't know what data pieces to consider. So the cheat list, if you will, of 30 pieces of data is where the team is like, yeah, that's data to collect. They're not synthesizing the data. They're synthesizing it, well, whoever the contact person is will be dumping the data into the template provided. We analyze the data. We being my team, not my firm, not the DELT.
And I'm going to add, I think the qualitative piece to this, I mean, I know we're talking a lot about data, but the fact that Dr. Dubiel is going to come on site and work with 24 to 30 focus groups of staff members, parents, students, asking them the in-depth questions about how they see our district improving is just as important to me as the quantifiable data, is really getting the voice of our stakeholders and how they feel we're currently doing, what we could do better. And I think that is an important part of this process too. And that'll take several weeks, months. And I think one thing that stood out to me is Dr. Dubiel comes in person and meets with every single group. So she's not sending her team to do that, which I think speaks to her ability to really engage the group, but then have that consistency among the groups, if that makes sense. So I'm not sending out research assistants or TAs or people like that to do that work. She's actually leading those conversations with the staff and the students and the parents herself. So I think the qualitative piece is just as important.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the qualitative piece. You know, data is limited. It's only going to tell us the black and white and numbers. There are stories, endless stories. I've conducted almost 1,000 focus groups right now, and there are perspectives and experiences from stakeholders that come out in qualitative that is not documented anywhere. It's not a data point on a chart. There are instances of bullying occurring. There are instances of not feeling welcoming and belonging. That is not documented anywhere. There are focus groups where tears have been shed, where it can be very emotional, even though that's not the aim. But when someone is asked to share about their experience and what they like and what they don't like and areas of improvement, people do share. People often share. And those experiences is not something that any data can capture. There are some actually equity audits that are primarily qualitative data, not quantitative at all. So we pride ourselves in taking a mixed method approach.
I would like to chime in just for a second to offer a comment to the board. As I was vetting the different equity firms along with my cohorts throughout the state, the process of selecting the questions is pretty standard with the different equity firms that we were vetting. Most of them engaged in some kind of process of where they would say, we're going to submit a list of questions of what we think you should ask, and then you have the opportunity to submit your own questions of what you would like to have asked during equity audit. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that this is a pretty standard practice from external equity auditors.
Anne, did you have a question?
I did, thanks. I have a couple. And please forgive me if you already mentioned these. I was trying to keep up with you. You had a lot to give us. One was, did you mention already how long you plan to come back and check in with us over the years progress? Because I know that the original audit's going to be multi-year, but then, if we come up with plans that we want to implement, they're going to take some time. Do you come back, 3 years later, 4 years later to check in with us and see how things are going?
So the equity audit itself is a 9 to 12-month process. So think of it as a school year. Now, districts do different things. Districts will bring us on to conduct an equity audit, and maybe we don't hear back. Most districts, though, will continue the partnership and will want to move forward with an equity action plan. The equity action plan follows year one, and then there's a rollout after that year one of planning. Where the rollout, yes, I do check in how you're doing. Do we need to consider an equity action plan for year two, or did your equity action plan, was it designed for 2 years? So there are checkpoints in that respect, and the continued relationship will is like it ranges from client to client, but it will be based on what the need is There are some clients that have a multiple year, no matter what. They'll have me do PD with all staff. They have me do PD onboarding. They have me do check-in with their equity action plan, what we call their strand leaders. They'll have me check in if they have a DEI director to check in with them on a regular basis. It absolutely ranges on the time and the budget that they are at to do that.
Okay, well, thanks. I mean, and I'm thinking about this because Dr. Ivory Tatum had really wanted to have this work underway when we were then starting on our own strategic planning, which needs to be renewed. And so that is, we're hoping to make this what we find through this a cornerstone of some of that. And obviously that's also a very detailed process, but also has very long reaching plans built into it. So that's why I asked. But then my second one is really nitpicky, and it's probably just because I'm tired, but I was looking at the it's called your equity audit, the purpose page that has the 4 phases listed. It's not any graphic, it's just like a PDF.
Mhm.
And at the bottom where it says phase 4, 2 to 3 months, I don't know if I'm reading this right. It says it says superintendent or designees receive a draft equity. The purpose of the draft is to review and identify any errors or needed edits. No changes or modifications to the findings are accepted to the draft. A final version is provided to the district upon completion. So no changes or modifications, meaning you're not going to change the data at that point, or what? I mean, what is not going to be accepted to the draft? Because I'm just tripping over the language.
Nope, you're good. So between phase 4 and phase 5, phase 4 is when the draft report is done. When the draft report is complete and it's ready to be sent to the superintendent, there's one hard copy report, and this is just a draft. And the idea behind it is to do a couple of things, do a checkpoint. Sometimes there could be different wording. So maybe I refer to your gifted programming as gifted, but your district calls it something else. So those are the changes the superintendent would make on the hard copy, or they can create a digital document and start documenting that. Sometimes, and looking at the data, which will be reinforced in the report, they'll notice, or later on, oh, there was actually an error in the data we gave you. You reported the data correct, but there was actually an error. Can you make this change? Those are all things that's all part of the draft process. What they cannot change are the findings as a result of the equity audit. So if there's a district that disagrees with the findings, like, no, this is not a problem. Well, the quantitative and or qualitative data prove that it is an area that needs to be addressed. That cannot be changed. In other words, sometimes a finding comes out that the district is not happy about. It's sometimes not an easy process. And so they can't change the findings. That would completely skew, and that would compromise the integrity of the audit. The whole process of the draft opportunity is to make sure that the data is clean, to make sure that the language I'm using is correct, but it's not for them to manipulate or change the findings because they disagree. So that's what that means. That's the section 4 of the report.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought you meant. And I'm glad to hear you say that, I mean, we know that there's going to be some discomfort involved in this kind of an audit, and that we're probably going to hear some things we don't want to hear, but I'm glad to know that we're going to be true to that. And, we're going to see what we're going to see, and it's not up to you to change any of that to make us feel better. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
Brian.
wanted to follow up on the qualitative data side of things. So you're conducting the focus groups. Do you recruit the people who are going to take part in the focus groups? And if so, how do you do that to be representative of all the constituents that you want?
Yeah, great question. I do not recruit the folks that are part of the focus groups because I don't know who those individuals are. So once the district chooses which package they want to choose, you'll notice that it can range from 18 focus groups to 36 focus groups. That actually comes out of phase one in having a conversation with DELT. So let's say the district chooses, the package with 18 focus groups. All right, DELT, of these 18 focus groups, how many do you want to dedicate first to the different stakeholder groups? How many do you want to dedicate to students? How many to staff? How many community members? Sometimes they do it very evenly and they say 666, right? 3 groups, all right? And then within that, they're given a formula as to how many people can participate in each, because I have an hour with. So it's very much detailed as to how many people can participate in a short amount of time to give some robust responses. So all of those pieces gets ironed out. Now, the district, the DELT team will determine those pieces. DELT will also determine in organizing, they're not organizing it right then and there. They're making a decision on how they want to organize the focus groups. Some districts will organize focus groups by even numbers in the stakeholders. Some will do it focusing more on students. Some will do it focusing more on staff or community members. Some districts will decide to do focus groups focus on affinity by race, affinity by LGBTQ status, affinity by free and reduced population. They can absolutely do it. Some districts have a very homogeneous community, so they really want to create their focus groups for staff to be teachers and then administrators and then paraprofessionals. It ranges widely. And I can give you the structure and I give the team the structure, but they have to decide what makes the most sense for them in deciding first, what is the structure of whichever amount of focus groups you're participating, and then who actually participates. Now, as far as who actually participates, one of the things that's often asked is, well, who are these individuals that are going to participate? There's a combination of things that I recommend. Some school districts will do an invitation only for people to participate. Some will do first come, first serve. I'm a fan of a combination. If you know that there's students, staff, and community members that should participate, ask them to participate. And then at the same time, leave some slots open. So I think that's one of the most balanced ways that we can allow people to participate in focus groups. And we hope that they participate, because sometimes you can imagine people sign up and then they don't show, but hopefully they do participate in the focus groups because their voice is important in the process.
And Brian, can I add to that?
Oh, yeah.
We do have some people who applied to be part of the equity task force that were not chosen to keep the size of the group. So I maintain all their information. Everybody, I emailed all of those people and said, when we get to this process, I'll reach back out to all of them and invite them to participate in the focus group portion of it.
Last question, and the rest of the equity task force that you presented to may already have seen these, but do you have example audits that we as the board can look at so we can see what a final product of yours looks like?
So I cannot provide you a publish. What I can do is direct you to some of the districts that I know, and I'd be happy to share that with Brandon offsite, but direct you to some of the districts I know that have published it. So once I give the district their final digital version of the report, I always recommend to districts, publish it, make it transparent. What they decide to do with it is at their discretion. So some districts do publish it and do post it on their websites, and some districts don't. So I'd be happy to share with Brandon those districts that have published it, and then anybody should be able to find it and have access to it.
I don't know if this is a question for both you, Dr. Tatum, as well, but I think in thinking about how focus groups are formed, I think it needs to be very, I guess, intentional, in that in the formation of these groups, you're not biased in what you're choosing and how they're being put together. So how does the randomization to support better data come into play when thinking about how we're saying, oh, okay, so this select group is now selecting other select groups. I guess I just want to make sure that in that process for being very aware of what those groups actually look like.
Yeah, I think we'll open it up, just like we opened up the equity task force process. We'll open it up to see who would like to be involved first of all. I mean, it will be a time commitment to participate, so. I don't know, Dr. Dubiel, if you have any sage advice on that, but.
You know, there's no two focus groups alike. There are people who sign up to be in a focus groups. They want to participate and then they don't say anything. They fold their arms and they don't trust the process, but they're there and they don't say anything during the focus group and they don't get kicked out and it's not like they can be replaced. They're there. They signed up, they're there. And sometimes it's a shame because they participated, they signed up to participate, but they don't actually share. And then there are some individuals that do absolutely feel comfortable in sharing. The dynamics of every focus group have never been the same. And what comes out of focus groups, that's why, again, I place so much weight. There's a lot of weight that should be placed on qualitative data. It is so comprehensive of what people share. I think being as balanced as you can in opening up the focus groups, really informing people. If you are committing to participate in a focus group, please show up. There is no makeup, so please show up. It's an hour of your time. Please know your responses are confidential and we welcome your input. I think saying that over and over again will be important and critical for stakeholders to feel that they can participate, and hopefully they do.
Any further questions?
I just like to reiterate what Laura just said, because if you have a group, choosing a group, you're potentially just pushing the bias down the road. Also, if you're choosing your focus groups based off who volunteers, you just selected away from the people that don't volunteer, who probably are the poorly, performing families in the district, so it'd be important, I think, to actually go out and try to recruit people who are underrepresented, typically not just the people that read the email and respond immediately, but people that do not do that, who have the qualitative stories that will break all of your hearts.
Any other further questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Dubiel, Dr. Caffey.
So I do want to talk about next steps really quickly. So Dr. Caffey and I are going to get back together. Board members, you have the packages that Dr. Dubiel referred to. We are looking at Title II funding. Title II is our one of our federal grants. It is the strand of our title support services that provide training, professional development, recruitment of high quality teachers, principals, and other school leaders. So that is the professional development arm of title, which this is a perfect place for us to pay for these services. This aligns with our school improvement plans. You guys have all seen our equity goals. Every single one of our schools have equity goals, which also are submitted through title. So that is the arm of how we're planning to move forward with this this consultation with Dr. Dubiel, if that is the board's desire for us to use so.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Our next study topic is the Evolved Door Detection System demo. John.
Thank you. And I think Kevin should be popping up here as well. Let me go ahead and bring you up.
So
Here.
while
Perfect.
John is doing that, I do want to give a little bit of background while Kevin's coming in. So welcome, Kevin.
Hello.
I've seen Kevin a couple of times now. So we have been talking about door detection just a little bit, not with the board, but in our administrative space at the high school. You heard a public comment from Principal Nance Ms. Blixen's here from the high school. I don't know if you want to move up. You definitely can. Mr. Nance went to the soccer game tonight, and unfortunately, our players lost. We're very sad. So he's there. He really wanted to be here tonight. So we have been having conversations at the middle school and at the high school level about our concerns with some of the community violence outside of school, how some of those things are trickling into our schools. We decided at the very beginning of the year, even though some of our other districts around us were having more intense conversations about this, that we wanted to try a few things first. So as we've talked about here, we've tried some of those preventive, things like Ms. Blixen's doing a good job modeling her IDs. So we've had the students wearing their IDs, and we have the scanners in, and we've hired additional supervision staff. We've added more radios and communication coverage. We're talking about increasing cameras. So we tried some of those things, and we are still, it is really hard at the high school, I feel, with just all of the things that they are trying to balance in terms of keeping students safe, keeping a positive culture and climate. So we re-engaged this conversation again a few weeks ago. We invited Kevin to come to the district crisis planning team and share how the technology works. And the crisis team was very impressed. We have a couple of administrators and other staff that are part of that group. And they felt that at this point, it was time to bring the discussion to the board level and discuss in public and get feedback from you about moving forward. So our plan is to hear your thoughts. I shared an email with staff. So at the high school, I hope some of them are watching. We've shared the website, some of the evolved materials with them. I know Mr. Nance has been actively talking with students about this. We haven't shared a student survey or anything yet, but we are going to try to get a little more student voice around this as well. Our teachers are excited to see it. They have not seen the demo, so I know we have some staff that are probably watching and will watch the YouTube video as well to see how this works. So some of our main concerns is we want to make sure we can get students in quickly, that this is not going to be a process where we have 1,200 students lined up outside of a door if we decide to do this. We want to get them in quickly, efficiently. We do not want a environment that feels prison-like. We want something that's seamless, that our students come in. Yes, they know that the detection systems are there, but they don't feel like they're walking into the courthouse and emptying their pockets and taking everything out of their purses. This system doesn't work like that, which is one of the reasons we're attracted to it. And we don't want something that is going to be stationary and be there forever, where we can't change it, or it can't be fluid if we need to do something different. So those were some of the things we've talked about at the crisis team. And we wanted to come now and have Kevin come and share some of this with the board as well in our public. So welcome, Kevin.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I love these conversations with school boards and schools in general. I think John wanted to say a couple of things before I got started. John, do you want to say a couple of things, and then I'll.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, I think Dr. Ivory Tatum said a lot of it, but I had kind of a jaw-dropping moment earlier this week where I was in some conversations, and I was saying, oh, this will be a great thing to be preventative and keep weapons out of our schools. And the person told me, like, oh, the weapons are in the schools. And I was just kind of stunned, because that was it. Having gone to look at these and all, I have some pictures I can show later. I just, again, highlight, this isn't like making the school look like a prison where you're walking through kind of the big metal. It's seamless and it's fast. There's not going to be lines around the block. And that this is something that we can put in to make the schools a lot safer without making them seem like they're not a school anymore. So I know you have your presentation and I have some extra pictures. We did do kind of a demo where we tested this out with some student Chromebook devices and some other things. And I have some follow-up pictures of that too.
Awesome. Yeah, let me just get started, just kind of an introduction of myself and how I got into this company. It takes literally 2 minutes. I live in Chicago. I've been here a little less than 3 years from Atlanta. So the reason that my voice is so hoarse right now is because I've been yelling at the TV the last 7 days because the Braves are in the World Series, and it hasn't happened in 22 years. So I'm excited. But I've been in the security space for about 7 years. Most of that, believe it or not, was in the correction space. So I've been in jails, I've been in prisons, I've seen what security is like in that industry. This is definitely not. I got out of that because I wanted to sell something a little bit, just a little bit easier to operate and make it look like an inviting experience. I want people to walk through this machine and think that they never walked through anything. And we get that a lot. We get that a lot from theme parks and sports venues and tourist attractions. And believe it or not, we get it from schools as well. Believe it or not, I was in a school this morning in Indiana. I'm not going to tell you which one, but I had a system that we had set up. We've been talking to them for many months. And they wanted to see it, and we did a lot of training, pre-training, and kind of prep the kids and the students for what they were going to see. And I actually have a video of that. I literally just brought this up about 10 minutes ago. So I want to show you this video. You can see how easy this is. It's only a 10-second video. It's pretty quick, but you'll catch on. So. So those are students walking through. They never heard about the system before, maybe besides on an email that the director of security had sent out. But that was their first reaction. A lot of them, this was a school that had a shooting. There was a teacher that came by last night, completely unannounced and extremely ironic. He was the one that got shot 4 times and was the one that tackled the shooter. And it was weird that he had showed up, he dropped his kid off at a swim meet, but he was excited because they were putting that in 3 years later. But that's not the point of this presentation. So I just want to, I'm sorry, I want to share my screen into my presentation and just kind of go over the company a little bit and a little bit about us. So Evolve Technology is the name of the company. Evolve Express is the name of the product. We've been a company since 2013. We've screened over 100 million people going through this machine, stopping thousands of weapons, entering venues, places of work, schools, hospitals, really anywhere with a doorway. As a company, like I mentioned, 8.5 years old, we've invested a lot of money into research and development. We have some very wealthy investors, but also some very smart advisors and people that really open their Rolodex to their groups of friends and their sphere of influence. Governor Bush, Bill Gates. Governor Bush, as you know, is very hands-on with the education sector. He has been a fearless leader as part of our team in helping us get into this space and get more aligned with what schools are really looking for. It's moving people quickly. It's getting a lot of students through the door unobtrusively. That prison-like scenario out the door. We're not at court anymore. We're not at court at all. We're not in a corrections facility. And what's the best thing about it is it's portable and very accurate. But our advisory board, as you can see, some of the biggest names in public security, Mark Sullivan, Director of Secret Service, and then Juliet Kayan, who I'm sure you've seen on the news a few times in the last couple of years. She does a lot of work with emergency response. But what's really cool, let me go back a slide, is this guy right here, Mike Ellenbogen, our founder. We recently went public, which is really cool for a lot of reasons, but the biggest reason is it got us a lot of money to reinvest into our own product. So this guy, Mike, for example, he founded the company many years ago, but he sold this company that he started. Anyone that's ever been on an airplane has had their bags go through this product that he created. It's basically a weapons and explosive trace detector. So he created this product, he ran it, got a really big company, sold it, and then started to evolve. With that same mission in mind, how do I keep the public safe? How do I keep our kids, our friends, our family, professional sports teams, tourists safe? And he created the Express. Since about 2019, when the Express came out, we've been able to land a lot of really big customers, which is really cool. As you see Six Flags on here. So Six Flags theme park in St. Louis, the one up in Chicago, and then all the other ones around the country, as well as Mexico and Canada. There's a theme park in Orlando where Mickey Mouse lives that I can't tell you the name of because under strict NDA, but that's a customer of ours too, where I'm sure a lot of people or possibly some of you have been. Chicago Cubs, if you've been to a Cubs game in the last year, just about every single one of their entrances has this product, as well as the Willis Tower observation deck, downtown Chicago, the Sears Tower, and several other companies as well. But we have one mission in mind. How do we differentiate phones and pocket clutter from firearms? How do we operate at video frame rates? How do we create that improved security, but also improved visitor experience? It doesn't really exist, especially before this. This absolutely helps that. There was a school in Connecticut. I'm sure you saw this on the news recently. I think it was 2 weeks ago. A student came to school, had a gun, and he got scared. He went to the principal and said, "Look, I have a gun." And what they did, that happened on a Friday. On a Monday, they set up 6 metal detectors at the school. So class started at about 8:05. Students were told to arrive at 7:30 to begin screening their 1,300 students. The problem was the kids didn't get the students didn't get into class till about 9:15. It took them almost 2 hours to screen 1,200 people. They just weren't prepared. They didn't expect that to happen. And then the next day they said, actually, student can get there at 6:15 in the morning to be screened so they can get through quicker. With the Evolve Express, we are able to provide that visitor experience or guest experience, student experience, while operating at video frame rates. How are we able to do that? By being able to screen for guns, bombs, larger knives, and threats that we're trying to keep out of the door and keep out of schools. We are able to market 3,600 people per hour, more of like a venue type of security ticketed event. My realistic student, I guess, throughput is about 2,200 to 2,400 people per hour, which is still a lot. And if you're saying you have 1,200 students at the high school, earlier today, we screened 780 in about 25 minutes. So it was very quick. People and bags are screened together. Multiple people are screened together. You can have more than one person just walking through this lane. It's about just less than 4-foot lane. It's big enough for all types of strollers, wheelchairs, and other items as well to move through there. It is completely safe for students, teachers, faculty, parents to walk through. It will not affect your implanted device like a cochlear implants or heart monitors. It will not pick up on any type of surgical devices that have been implanted in your body. Think of this as kind of walking out of a Target and looking for kind of like the stolen objects, loss prevention. It's that kind of signal. It's not millimeter wave technology. And if I'm getting a little too nerdy, that's basically what the technology is that metal detectors are, where if you have a heart monitor, it'll affect that. This is using radio frequency, it's reading radio frequency waves. It's got 10 times faster than metal detectors. I know this is a ridiculous acronym everyone throws around, but we really do use artificial intelligence. We have algorithms written looking for types of weapons, types of metals, shapes of metals. So we're looking primarily for barrels and slides. So we're looking for guns, but we do find knives, of course. But the coolest part about this product, I think the coolest part about this product, kind of the cherry on top, is, you know, when you go through a metal detector, it's always like, oh, well, take your phone out of your pocket. Oh, okay, but what if it was my steel-toed boots or an ankle holster? They don't know that. They make you kind of process of elimination. Us, we take a picture of you. We actually take a picture of the person walking through and put a red box exactly around where they're on their body it is. So in a school setting, primarily a backpack, but at a football game, they're not bringing backpacks. It'll put a box on their ankle if there's something that they're trying to bring in, possibly an ankle holster, or if they're trying to bring in a weapon on their hip, it'll put it on their right hip. So you don't need to do a full pat down or even a full hand one. You just on their hip or around the right side of their hip. And this is something that my team comes in and helps your team get comfortable with. I have a group of guys and women that come out and work with you all tirelessly and make sure that you're set for success when you open those doors. We have a marketing department that sends home communications for your students' parents to tell them what's going on, and we can help you guys create really any kind of communication necessary to make this go easier and smoother. Here's a little minute and 20-second video of different scenarios. I don't like showing this to schools because we're trying to keep our eyes on the schools, but this gives you an idea of just different types of environments that this product is used in. You can have high flow through environments, like if you have an event at school, graduation, for example, where you're just trying to get a lot of people through the door at maybe a lower sensitivity, still catching weapons and guns, but being able to have less of a let's call it false alarm rate than normal. So for example, convention screening, fan screening, going into this is at the Mercedes-Benz Arena in Atlanta, where we do about 70,000 people every other Sunday. This is the Wynn Hotel and Casino in Vegas. At one point, these guys, this casino screened 32,000 employees a day. Now they're down to about 8,000. This is patron screening at a performing arts center. Metal detectors over here. This guy actually had to call in for short-term disability because he had tendonitis in his elbow because he was going like this too much. True story. And this shows one of our employees walking through the system, and red light's gonna go off. It's gonna beep, boom, on his hip. There's a fake weapon with a slide on it. So no stopping, no emptying of pockets, and no removing bags, no divesting. Just walk right on through. This is pretty cool, more for the analytical people in the room. If you have multiple systems, you're able to see on a device or on Tableau, which is the software. You have an app on your phone, or you can have it on the computer, where you're able to identify your systems and how many visitors, clear rates, alarm rates. And even we have a part of it where you're able to tag the alarms. So you'll be able to say that was a weapon, that was a knife, that was a gun, or that was a police officer, and you'll see those come up. One thing I alluded to earlier a second ago was false alarms. We do have some, no system's perfect, but the false alarm rate that we see mostly are things that, believe it or not, students don't really bring to school. So we see a lot of glasses cases. The reason that glasses cases, the hard glasses cases, is because they're metal all around and they have the makeup of what like an IED would look like. And umbrellas are also a very common nuisance alarm. But I just can't not tell you that if I leave this meeting. And then just some pictures to show you 1 and 2 lane configuration. So this 2 lane that you saw in the picture, it can be broken down into a 1 lane. You can always add an extra lane to a 1 lane to make a 2 lane. It's very easy, very, very configurable. This is a picture of a single lane at a school in Rich Township School District in the Rickton Park, Illinois area. They actually took this 1 lane and created a 2 lane. you'll see these wires all over the place. These are forerunners for wires. We actually have wireless tablets now, which is really cool. This came out about a week and a half ago. We finally started shipping them. So there are no wires other than just a power supply. And if you're into the network world, this does not run on your network whatsoever. We are not on your network. We actually have a 4G LTE router that's in the system right here, which is how we're able to push out updates for detection updates, algorithm updates. We do it about once every, let's call it 4 or 5 months. And we're very hands-on when we push those updates out to make sure you guys are set moving forward. Or some other areas that these are located, hospitals, which is really cool. This is a very large hospital group up in Rochester, Minnesota, that I can't tell you the name of. But this last one is probably my favorite picture. The favorite use of what this middle graphic panel is. Six Flags took it and kind of sold it to Mars Candy and M&Ms and customized it. Now, obviously, you guys aren't going to sell this, but you can make it a little bit more inviting than just the boring Evolve Technology one. And you can put your team logo, team or teacher of the month, teacher of the year. You can create put your football schedule, whatever you want on there to make it kind of more inviting. And that's the end of my presentation.
And before we jump into questions, I did want to go over real quick. We did go down and evaluate one of these in person. We took all of our student devices and we got again, simulated starter's pistol from the district. But while we were down there, we went before opening hours, so we could test it with some of the different safety settings. Like you said, as people were coming in, like almost everybody walked right through strollers. It didn't as we were testing it, the hinges on the Chromebooks were a frequent false alarm. But we've seen several other districts who have solutions where you can do kind of a pass around or kind of just hold it in front of you. And then the bounding box on those devices will come up in front of you. I think I have a picture of the.
Yeah, kind of echoing what John was saying, there are a lot of schools really, the one that I was at this morning, what's really unique because they had iPads and it didn't affect the iPads didn't go off, which was awesome. But that's not many schools are like that. Rich Township, and I'm happy to introduce you to Dr. Evans over there. She's great. She's had this for almost a full year now. They pass around their Chromebooks and they fly, and we train them how to do it. If you don't want to pass them around, you can hold them up above your head, or you can hold it in your hand walking through it. If you hold it in your hand walking through it, it's going to put a red box around the computer, and then it'll also put another box around something else if something else alerts. But again, our team is trained. We have solution engineers who will come out and work with your staff to make sure you're running this like a well-oiled machine, and making sure that you guys are set up for success.
Yeah, and one other thing, I think you shortened your presentation a little, but this does keep a record of everybody who came through with like every alarm that went through. So while we were down there, you could see, I've got up like the 20-shot picture, Kevin, of where you can see everybody who came through and what they have. There's one tablet kind of at the front area where they're directing people who do alarm. And then there are also tablets where they do the secondary screening. So those people doing the secondary screening have all that same information of, oh, you had a bounding box on your left front pocket. You need to take that out and we need to wand your left front pocket. Yeah. And I will say this gentleman kind of here in the first slide, when his boss walked away, I had the opportunity to talk to him for about 10 minutes. He's been doing security at Six Flags for 18 years, he said. And he said the whole time they're doing kind of the old fashioned metal detectors, which you can kind of see in the corner over there, that they usually had 20 staff running those old metal detectors, just because every person came through with their keys and you had to put it in a bucket. Now that they're on this new system, they're down to 6 to 8 staff, depending on the traffic levels. The other thing he mentioned, which was really astounding, in the previous 5 years, they'd been using the traditional metal detectors. They had found 0 weapons. In the last year, they were using this system. They found 5 guns that were trying to come into the park. So it was unsolicited, just from the guy who was kind of working the things there. And I do have one more video. This was, let me see if I can find the right one. This was as people were coming in during kind of their peak entry time, just to see how fast it was going. It was so fast, they couldn't get people to come through fast. They kept having to kind of wave them in, come on through, come on through. There's one woman had something on her shoulder, and then at some point, somebody will come through with a stroller. And because of all the tubular steel, it really does not like
Yeah, the Six Flags is unique. I'll tell you why. They run it on the most sensitive setting. They're looking for anything. They just want a reason to search a bag sometimes, but they also find a lot of stuff. They're a very unique customer. The Mickey Mouses of the world don't run it on sensitivity that Six Flags does, but everyone's different. But Six Flags also, St. Louis got through upwards of 6-figure amount of people over the last 2 weekends. So it's just ridiculous throughput, which is just crazy. I'd love to answer some questions if you all have any of them. I'll tell you everything I can.
Board members, any questions, comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Cool.
I was actually on the district's crisis planning team, but could you reiterate to people what exactly happens if somebody does go through and it's marked? Like, are the students searched? How would you get this weapon off of them? Could you please tell the public about that?
Yeah, that's what we can recommend is what other clients of ours do. If it goes off and they have a weapon on them, they're usually they comply most of the time. In my experience, they've complied every time. I've been around when several hundreds, close by thousands of people have been found with a gun on them. And it's usually, obviously it's usually people that have concealed carrying permits, but they identify we have detected. You don't have to tell them this, hey, please step over here for secondary screening. They go over there, you can hand their one part of their body. If it's on their body or if it's on their bag, you just take a quick peek in their bag and make sure there are no weapons in there. If a weapon is found, obviously that's a different story. That's a policy I'm sure on your district's behalf, and probably your resource officer you would need a resource officer probably at that location.
So what we've talked about doing, Brenda, and what we talked about with the committee is we would use these at door 1, which is the door on Iowa Street, which a large number of our students come through in the morning. We would also use these at door 9, which is the door in Tiger Lane. Right now we're entering through 3 doors, so we would not, just due to cost, we would not recommend that we put one at door 3, which is the door off of Ray Street. So our students that ride MTD would exit MTD and then they'd have to come around and go through door 1. So we would have a team there. So as Kevin described, if you do get a bounding box placed on you at some point, we have areas that we would be able to invite that person away from the rest of the flow. So they kind of move off to the side. Officer Burnett would help work with our SRSs. And like Kevin said, he has people who come down and do the training. And sometimes it's simple as somebody's got a little Swiss Army knife or something on their keychain. And you can see it is a bunch of keys in someone's pocket. So you know they don't have a gun, but you're gonna pull them to the side and say, hey, you know, just show us what you have in your pocket. The kid pulls it out and keeps going. I think we would want the trained eye of our SRO to kind of help us when we do have situations where we think that there's someone might have something that they're not supposed to have. And we have that secondary location where they would, you know, kind of remove that student or guest or visitor. Because remember, this isn't just about our students. We're also very concerned about the other people who come from the streets into our schools who may be coming in for no good. They're not our students. So we would have those secondary areas already at door 1 and door 9 ready for that. So.
Yeah.
And I can't add.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say this is as much as a deterrent as it is a detector. This is a big deterrent. When people see this when people see this at all, you know, when students see it on day 1 and they know it's going to be there on day 179, 180, they're going to know that they're not going to be able to sneak anything past it, which is the great part about it. And the other thing is when you have a parent or someone that's coming off the street, they're going to walk up to it and have no idea what it is. And then they're going to turn around and kind of go back if they came in for the wrong reason. We see that all the time. Oh my gosh. If you were to walk around, let's call it Willis Tower or Wrigley Field, you could have a new armory.
And
Okay.
one more thing on the secondary screening, it's not a pat down, like watching it as like they're going through it kind of full bore as they're doing it. It's everybody comes through and it's very quick. If they flag them, they pull to the side and they're like, oh, pull out your whatever keys, and they won the pocket and they go on their way. It was about 15 seconds. It's not like 2 minute, like put everything you own into this little plastic tray.
Yeah, a strong
Right.
majority of the alerts that are going to go off on students are going to be in their bag, and it's and then the great part is this is there's going to be a learning curve here for the first, let's call it few days, 3 or 4 days. When we did Rich Township, they used to have to come in and we used to have like this awful, it was terrible, this thermal detector. It was right after COVID, students came back to class. These students had to walk in, stop, stare at a thermal camera, and then pass their laptop around and walk through. And they picked up on that pretty quick. And then when that thermal went away, it was just easy, just right when they're walking and pass around, keep going. It was very, very, very easy. And they catch on. They realize, okay, if I'm going through and I have this giant water bottle that goes off every time, I want to keep that at home so I don't have to go to the secondary screening. The good part is it's the same people coming in every day for the most part, and they catch on and they don't want to be that person that has to go to secondary screening.
Thank you very much. I had heard this before, but I just wanted our public to hear it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, questions?
So it sounds like
Oh, sorry.
Chromebooks are an issue. Is that what I heard? I don't think I'd heard that before.
Yeah, it's the hinges on the Chromebooks because of the tubular steel look kind of like
Oh,
a
it's
barrel of a gun.
bullet.
So, and again, as Kevin said, there's a lot of things you can do to kind of get around that, and schools have figured out a lot of ways where you can pass them around. Again, when we were testing it out, iPads never pinged, phones never pinged, but Chromebooks were about 60 to 70%, depending on kind of how you held them and how you oriented them. And we were testing with the staff down there at probably the setting that we'd be using in the schools was the D setting, which is, it goes A, B, C, D. They were using, I think, the F setting in the parks. But even at the D setting, it was still hitting that kind of 60 to 70%. So that would be something we would have to consider, making sure there's a way for them to pass those.
Because there's no
around.
way around that, then it sounds like there's no setting that will say, when you see this, then this is a Chromebook, and it's not.
There-
Or is there, I
So
guess
you
is my
can train
question.
the AI with the as things come through and as it flags, there's an option in the software to say, this is a Chromebook, this is a Chromebook. And eventually after a million times, it'll hopefully figure it out
Hopefully it
with
won't
the
take that
Not a
training.
million, but yeah, it's basically we're able to use the metadata that we're able to receive from the scans and mirror it to what we are identifying it as, and then over time being able to miss the Chromebook. Now there are settings that you can put it on to miss the Chromebook, but those settings are you'll also miss certain handguns that you're not going to miss the normal capacity 40 caliber 9mm caliber, but you'll miss like the subcompacts, which is it's not really the it's a difficult give and take. Now we do have some customers in South Carolina who do run it on that setting, that lower sensitivity setting, and they run it on that at certain doors. They don't run it on that certain setting every day. They switch it up. It's kind of they kind of play it how they want to play it. But there is a setting if you wanted to put it on that it should miss most Chromebooks. To give you an example, the Chicago Cubs front office, they have one of these systems. Every person that is coming in with a Dell or an HP or an Apple. They don't want them beeping every time, so they put it on the B as in boy sensitivity, and they are able to get through it without it beeping.
And John, you put your picture that you had up, Tori, he had a picture of when his family went down and tested. You can hold the Chromebook in front of you when you walk through, and it puts a bounding box.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can blow that up a little bit.
Yep.
I saw
here, let
that.
me-
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is, again, and so if you're walking through and holding it, if you're holding it like this, it'll put the bounding box very clearly on the device. So the rest of me is clear. And if you have multiple things that identifies as a threat, it'll beep multiple times. So if you have 3 things in your backpack, you'll get 3 beeps with 3 different boxes on your backpack. So as long as you're holding it in front of you, you can see, oh, the bounding box is in front of them. So that's not what I'm worried about. And then if you hit 2 beeps, you're like, oh, and I need to also see your backpack. So there's some options to kind of fix the issues with the Chromebooks, but
I just kind of wondered with us being a
Mhm.
one-to-one, I mean, that's pretty much every student is going to be walking through the Chromebook. And so I don't know if we went with this, if the plan is to have them, to educate them that you need your Chromebook in your hand each time you enter
Yeah.
a school building, or is that what?
well, and I think Kevin had, again, in the other presentation, I think a picture, but I'm gonna step away from my microphone, but as you came through, there would be a table and you had your Chromebook and you just kind of set your Chromebook down and grabbed it on the other side. That was, I think, the fastest way that they had people going through. Is that accurate, Kevin?
Yeah, it's definitely the fastest. Yeah, it's and it's the fastest and the most least labor intensive. You're walking up, you put it on the table, you walk through, you grab it off the table, kind of thing.
Like Robbie's patiently waiting.
Well, my original question, Brenda actually already asked, and that had to do with that was the monitoring of this, because like, does the line stop when somebody needs to be wanted? Or like, let's say 6 people in a row come through with guns, you catch the first 2 and then 4 go through while you're wanting those 2.
No,
and then-
it keys on every person. So you have one person who's kind of the traffic director, and then you have 2 people, 1 or 2 people
Yeah.
directing, and then you have 2 people doing the secondary screening. So, and it's spaced out far enough that by the time you get to the secondary screening, those people, you have your people who are going, that are bypassing the system. Hopefully 90% are just walking straight through. And then whatever that extra 10%, those people go to the secondary screening. And you could have a line of 3 people there. And the one picture I saw, as it comes up, you've got your line of 20 pictures in kind of that array. And you just click on the person who you're looking at, and it pulls up a blown up picture of them with their bounding box. And then you can be like, okay, Lori, I need to see what's in your pocket, and you want her, she goes, and then you can go to the next person. Kim, you're on your phone. Is that what was beeping? So you just kind of go down the line.
I know, so maybe don't understand my question. I'm saying if there's a group of 10 guys, one of them wants to bring a gun in to kill somebody, and all 10 of them bring guns in simultaneously, you're not going to stop them all.
I think it would flag all 10 of them.
It would,
It
yeah,
would
it would,
flag
it
them
would,
all, but are you going to stop all 10 of them? Because, somebody could turn the corner and ditch it in the bathroom real fast.
I think
and
you
then
would
be like,
screen all
"Oh,
10
my
of
bag is
them."
empty. Look."
Oh,
Similarly speaking, you could tape a handgun to the back of your thing and you set it down on the table, then pick it back up when you go through. If you hold it in front of you, you could hold it like this. Pretend this is a gun.
Well, there'd be
Is there a
people on
camera on
both
both sides?
sides of you also.
I think you can beat the system once you study it enough.
yeah, I think you can, well, yeah, I don't disagree with that. The same thing is if you want to get into a professional sporting event with a gun, you'll get into the professional sporting event with a gun. There's ways to beat everything. There's ways to get, there isn't a way, if you're going to walk through the system, you're not going to get a gun through. It's going to be, if you're going to take it apart, just want to bring the barrel in, your buddy wants to bring the slide in, it's still going to beep. There's people, if someone is super into wanting to cause harm and cause havoc, in my 8 years of this industry, they're going to do it. And we're trying to prevent that from happening.
But to that point, there's a large number of installations of your product out in the world. Are there any recorded instances of somebody who's beat the system and used a gun at an event?
Not to my knowledge. There is someone who we caught a guy with a fully automatic gun with 45 rounds, and in his backpack he had a binder of different people. So he was in there for the wrong reason. We found him with 45 rounds. There's another instance where someone had to jump a fence with a gun to get in to a very large populated place. And he got caught right when he jumped the fence and he had the gun. But not to my knowledge of people beating the system and getting in and using the weapon. There's been instances where people have gotten in with a weapon that we have detected, but the screener did not pick up. But we have never, not to my knowledge I was the third salesperson in this company. Now we have 19. I've been a part of just about every sale that this product has been put into the United States, and I haven't heard of that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Laura.
sorry, Ann, go ahead.
Good, Laura.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I guess maybe not so much for Kevin, but I think for our district, I have some concerns about students who get misidentified or misboxed, that becomes a traumatizing experience for them. And then what? I think that that is a likelihood to happen. And so what are the other personnel members that are there that can handle their error responsibly in an adult fashion and not make it worse? I guess I have some concerns that will happen. And then what happens to those students? I think there's still some information to be had about some of the data of increased safety. I think statistically, maybe it's more traditional metal detectors don't necessarily stop what we want them to stop. This is clearly a different system. And maybe it's new enough that there's not a ton of data, but I think it would be worth comparing some of the statistical data on what's being stopped, how frequently it's being stopped. Is this the level of investment that we're making as a school district? Will we, is that the best way to use those resources? So those are some concerns I have. I don't know if there are specific answers right now, but I do think the third piece of that is actively seeking a significant number of student and input, anonymous surveys, as much as I appreciate Dr. Nance inquiring and engaging students, that's an intimidating scenario for a lot of students to tell their principal that they would be unsafe or not safe. So I think that's worth considering. I think we need to make sure that students can anonymously report their feelings on this. And while recognizing we have a lot of community violence. So I'm not, I don't have a perfect solution, but I want to make sure that we're also not just being like, yay, this is amazing, it's going to solve everything, because I don't think we can say that either.
Sure. So yeah, we do have plans to do a survey of students, and Julie's here. We have a lot of support staff at the high school. So our plan at initially, when we would roll this out, we'll have several adults, including administrators at the front. We have CPs, clinical professionals, social workers who, of course, will be more than willing to be present the first few days as we acclimate students to the system and get them used to what this process will look like. So sure, you want to say something, you can. Yeah, yep, you got to push the little button. Yes. There you go.
So we currently at each entry door, we do have either administrator or a student interventionist in addition to our SRSs. So we would just make sure that those people are still there, and then also enlist the help of any other of our support team, our support services team, to make sure that that we do have consistency when we're looking for these things. So,
Or just to support, like Laura was saying, just the social emotional wellness of the kids who come through and might be
Absolutely.
upset that they have to step to the side and be secondary screened or something.
absolutely.
Identification, not necessarily that they have to walk through. I think it's specific to being called out among your peers publicly for something that might not be accurate.
Sure.
That will last for a little while socially. So I guess that's more specific to what I'm
Sure.
saying. And are there surveillance concerns for students that will be photoed and videoed every time they go through this at all?
No, I don't think so. We keep those while we're there looking at them, and then we're not going to do anything with them. You mean the pictures that kind of keep their little snapshots? Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And it's at the two entrances, it's places we already have cameras with
anyway.
recording. So it's not keeping anything that's not already there.
Yeah, there's no personal identifiers whatsoever. That's included with that.
And just one more thing on the misidentification. I don't think there's going to be a stigma. It's like walking through the airport with your keys and oh, I forgot I have to put my keys in the tray. It's not like identifying you as somebody who's dangerous. It's just kind of it identifies you as someone who got flagged for a second and you have to go get your keys out of your pocket.
Maybe this is not super relevant or appropriate, but you're talking about barreled items like sanitary products have been tested and those don't flag alarms. Just curious.
No.
Because if I was a freshman and I had feminine products on me that got set off an alarm, I'd be like,
No, they're not metal.
Not
okay.
metal.
Yes.
Cylinder tape. I'm like, let's just be
Only
really
things
clear.
that are metal.
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope not.
I hope not too.
No, we're not. No, we're not. No, I mean, look, if a bag goes off and they search a bag, and that's a different story.
Any other questions? Brian?
And can I
sorry.
add that we do have private places that if we are going to look in their bag, we would take them into a more private place, not right there in the middle.
Yeah, Brian.
So on the staffing issue, if we're going to have it all day, does that mean there's at least 2 people at both doors all day long?
So that basically happens most of the time anyway. So the majority of the staff would be available right at 7:30. Julie's over that schedule. And so she will work with our team for door 1 and door 9 to make sure we have 3 to 4 people there from 7:30 until about 8:15, 8:20 is I think when we have the heaviest movement in those two doors, but we already have at least 2 people at each door throughout the day, all day. anyway.
I'm sorry, I meant, so one of the people was identified as Officer Burnett, but you're talking only in the morning. He's going to be positioned there, but he's not sitting there all day long.
Oh, gosh,
Parked at the
no.
door.
No, no, no.
Okay,
So
just in morning
We'll
time.
work with Kevin's team for training, and we have, what, 8 SRSs, or is that the goal to have 8, I think?
I'm hiring 8 new SRSs in addition to the 8 that I have
So we
currently.
added some staffing for just, not for this purpose, but to have additional adults
In the
all over
hallways.
building, in the hallways. We put positions there for the lunch. We had to add some positions because of all the students in all these outside lunch spaces. We needed additional supervision. So we have a lot of adults beyond Officer Burnett who will be able to be in these spaces. Yeah.
Sorry, and we keep talking.
That's fine.
Last
They're all-
question, which I assume is coming at some point, which is the sticker price.
Yeah, John, you have that, I think.
I do have some quotes for something. This price will probably get at least 1 or 2 other bids. But I can share that later in the email. Usually, like, you don't share bids openly until the bid process is kind of completed, but
Well, I mean, if this is a formal bid, you have to come up with a RFP and put it out, and then companies will come and bid, and it's a closed bidding process, right? Is there?
that was not the process that I think was required for this, but I think Carol can.
Well, it's considered technology, so
Technology,
it's
so we
exempt
don't have
from the
to-
bidding rules. We always get quotes and we usually try to get competitive quotes, but it's not required to be done by school code.
Or
Well,
Anne, I know.
Ann's been waiting for a while.
Well, that was, Brian asked my first question, which was cost, because I mean, and then during the presentation, Kevin, you had mentioned that in the event that a weapon is found, you recommend that an SRO would be probably the person to come and handle that situation. So I think some of my fellow board members might be able to infer where I'm leading this question is, this would be a cost that once we've got it, we've got it. This is money that we're going to spend and we will potentially keep spending on for maintenance and personnel. And it feeds into the question that I've always been asking about the budget for SROs and the need for SROs in our school and all the other personnel that we have. So, I mean, we're not going to answer the question right now, but this is foremost in my mind is how much money are we willing to spend on this thing? And if have we done due diligence to decide at what level do we decide that we want this in the first place? And we can't walk it back once it's there. And I can see a lot of potentials, as other people have pointed out, of how this may not be very helpful. I mean, what about with extracurriculars at night when we have theater productions or sporting events or whatever? Are we going to be able to screen people that way? Because logically, in my mind, if you're not going to be willing to screen them for any of those events, then why would you only want to screen it during the school day? Why wouldn't
We
you want to do
can,
it
they're movable.
wrap around? Okay.
They unhook and move in about 5 minutes.
But it just feeds into that greater question that I've constantly had about cost. And is this the best effective use of our money for our children's safety? And I'm guessing that there's going to be a lot of people on both sides of the fence. So I want to do due diligence before we lock ourselves into any kind of yes or no. And I don't know if this requires a board vote, full stop, just to even install them in the first place. We need to be talking about this a lot before we even take this to a vote, because I just see, I mean, I'm not trying to be cold and calculating. I do see big dollar signs right now, but I also see the non-monetary cost to what our district wants to do moving forward for security for our kids. And as people have pointed out, there are going to be kids who might be a little traumatized by having these things or a little triggered. I'm thinking if there's a pat down involved, that could be terrifying for a lot of people. And what if it's of a different gender or somebody who, identifies differently and feels, there's just a lot of things that could possibly go wrong with this. And so it's not any answer that I can get tonight. I don't expect anybody to answer me tonight, but I just hope that we're all thinking about these questions as we move forward.
Yep, this is our first conversation, so I anticipate we'll have many more once we get some more input from our staff and our students. Thank you. And just to clarify, nobody's doing pat downs. So I just wanted to say that out loud.
Yeah, no, I've never seen a pat down from using this. That's the great part about it. You don't need to do the pat down because it tells you exactly where it is.
Just to further that question, and for the the majority of the purpose of this equipment is for children. But in the event of an extracurricular activity where you do have adults, will our personnel be able to handle a large adult who might want to cause harm to somebody at any of our events? I mean, our support staff, you know, they're adults, but there's big and then there's big. And I mean, I'm only 5'4". If I had to deal with a man who was 6'2", if I was an SRS or something, I wouldn't feel comfortable being able to diffuse that situation if there was somebody angry or armed or otherwise to come in. And so is that helping security for our district? Is that, you know, it may not happen ever, but we have to anticipate this, and it could invite a lot of other issues that we didn't anticipate. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
So we have talked with Mr. Waller about using these at all of our football games. We can use them especially for all of our crosstown rivalry. When we played a crosstown rivalry game at the beginning of the year, it was very tense, and we had quadrupled staff out because we were concerned about some safety things. So I think having something like this at the gate of games like that, where we're going to have a huge crowd coming through, and that'll give everybody in the space, I think, more peace of mind. We can use them at the auditorium. We can literally roll them wherever we want them to go. So I just wanted to say that out loud. Thank you.
Ravi, do you want to
Ravi.
comment?
I was just going to comment about a comment that was made, and that is when the comparison is made that if an orange box is put around you, it's like, oh, I forgot my keys in the airport security line. That is a comment made from a white privileged male, and not that of a 17-year-old Black boy who every time they walk into a store, they're looked at like, did you just steal something? Or they're pulled over for driving, you know, in a nice neighborhood. So that is where the trauma comes in. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions?
I think it's important for us to, you know, really face the fact that, you know, we likely have weapons in our school. And, you know, I think that's the piece that's being missed here, is that, you know, we're having this conversation, we're talking about an additional piece of prevention. And it is just a piece, because, I mean, the reality is, you know, like the example of the person who jumped over the fence to get in with a gun, you know, we're not going to catch everything. But if the board members and the individuals listening don't realize that there are weapons in our school, it's time to get out of your bubble and realize there are weapons in our school. And while I don't think that we just, you know, get ridiculous with just spending an irate amount of money, I think we need to consider that one of our biggest things is to keep our kids and our staff safe, and to do those different things and to vet how we can do that. This is an option. It's not saying that this is what we're going to do. I think it does require much more conversation, both with students, with parents, with really vetting the staff as to what they think, and doing that in an unbiased kind of setting. But I think it's time for us to face the reality here, if we have not faced the reality, that there are weapons in our schools, and that while we would love for kids to come and tell about such and such who has a knife on them or who has bullets in their pocket, that's just not a reality. And if you don't know that's not a reality, I don't even know what to say about that. Our kids are scared to tell. They're not going to say Joey walked in with a gun that he's bragging about, because the retaliation for that person in the street is real. And if you don't see that happening, maybe you don't know the backstory to some of the shootings that are happening. And that's why you're maybe a little more laxed about what's happening here. But I'm in this community. I see it. I hear the stories. I talk to these kids all the time. There are weapons in our school. And we have a responsibility to do something about that. whether it's this or something else, it's got to be at the forefront of what we're doing right now. Because the violence is in the community and our school is not exempt. The killers right now are our school-age kids. Some of them are students, whether we want to admit that or not, they're our kids. So to in our mind sit and act like, oh, they're only going to do that in the community. Get real. That's my suggestion. Come out of that bubble and face the reality that this town is not what it was 10 years ago. Now, I'm the first to tell you, this is not my goal. It's not, I don't want to have to walk through metal detectors, but I also don't want to drive down the street and be shot at. You know, it's a lot of things I don't want, but it's the reality of what's happening. So just thoughts for you, board members, parents who are listening, teachers, community members. We got to get real. And we got to face the facts of the reality of 2021. And while it may not be your student who knows about it, your neighborhood, it's quite a few of our students in their neighborhoods. So think about that. I'm not pushing for or against this and what I'm saying right now, but I am saying we've got to do something beyond just having conversations about how we really don't want to go this route because this is just not Urbana. It's Urbana now, sorry. You don't see it's Urbana now, your eyes are not open. We don't want it to be Urbana, but it is. And until we can address some of the underlying issues, and it can't all be just on the school district to address those issues, it will never work if it's just the district.
Right.
We can pretend like it will. We can sit and try to hold our superintendent accountable and our teachers accountable and say, you, this would be different if you. It's a community effort.
Mm-hmm.
It can't just be us, but it affects us because we have these kids the majority of their day, their waking day. We got to do something. So that's my spill for the day. I know it was a little lengthy, but we've got to open our eyes. And, you know, I as a Black female, I understand what Ravi is saying. I understand what others are saying because I'm Black. You know, my kids are Black. We have those conversations. We deal with the biases. We do. But if you were to bring some of our kids in here, I think they would say, if I'm choosing between the scrutiny that I'm already used to in my everyday life and potential shooting where I'm having to duck and weave and pray for my life, potentially, I don't know. We'll see what they say about that. That's why we ask them what they think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we do a full survey. And I think that's very, very important before we make a decision that, you know, we're having that conversation, but we got to be real. I mean, we cannot overlook. And I know everybody doesn't know about every situation that's happening. And we're not going to start saying, you know, here's a rundown of what happened today at the high school.
Right.
But they're not sitting here at the table. Principal Nance is not writing that letter because he thinks things are starting to get bad, and they're living it daily. I'm having conversations with my daughter about what to do if a shooting happens. I mean, that's the reality. So we got to face that reality, and we have to be proactive. We can't wait until the shooting happens to say, oh, now we got to do something.
Yeah.
Now's the time to do it. And if you think that you're going to find all these thousands of stats online, oh, metal detectors don't prevent, how do you know that?
Right.
How can you put a number on the kid who walked away from the door this morning because they realized there's a metal detector? I'm waiting. Who has the answer to prevention?
Yeah.
That's what we've got to do in our district. We've got to talk about prevention instead of saying, I need a number on every single thing, because some things are not going to have a number. Some things we're going to have to prevent so we don't have that number show up. So we don't say we took 20 guns. We don't want any guns to come through because we want them to look and say, oh my gosh, what is this technology? it can see in my back, wait, I'm not bringing nothing in. I thought about it, I wanted to get back at little Johnny, but
Yeah.
I'm not bringing a gun in. I don't know what that red box is going to see in my bag. That's prevention. And those are the things you don't see the numbers for. So we got to be real. I'm looking around the whole table, not just
Yeah.
board members.
No.
We got to be real with the reality of 2021, whether we like it or not, period.
I was just
I'm
gonna
done.
add, whatever happens in the community, oftentimes it plays out Monday morning at school. Because maybe they were looking for somebody and couldn't find it, but they know they're gonna be at school Monday morning. And
And-
so, what happens over the weekend usually plays out. And unfortunately, we need to protect our students,
And Brenda, that's the prevention I'm talking about. That's where our SRO came in to tell us what happened over the weekend. Because guess what? Did you sit and listen to your scanner and have an inside sight as to all the things that happened in the community with our kids this weekend? You didn't. I didn't either.
Yeah, you can't. keep
But our
up with it,
SRO, that's his job to say
Right.
on Sunday night, hey,
And
we
he
had a
knows these
murder of a
families.
student. We had a kid who was found in an abandoned house dead, and maybe a couple of our students were involved.
Yes.
Here are the things that we need to put in place on Monday. That is prevention.
That's
right.
That's where you don't see numbers.
Right.
You,
And that's
you,
where
you
that
may never
bond-
even hear about it. You may never even know, hey, this happened with a student yesterday. We're going to put extra security at the door. The dad is threatening to come and jump on a student. These are real.
Yeah.
Adults are jumping on kids. We had a principal punched out just up the street from an adult who walked in the building and decided he didn't like something that principal had done to a student in discipline.
Yeah. And that's why I feel the SROs are very important, because oftentimes they're the bond with those students and families. Sometimes they can look to that SRO as a trusted adult to help them.
Well, it's the insight that we would otherwise never have. And that's
Yes.
where the prevention comes in. When that kid who had a bad weekend is walking in with bad intentions, and we do have some students like that, whether we want to admit that or not, some of these kids really don't care about coming to school to come to school. They're coming for other reasons. When that kid gets to the front door and they see, I've got a army of people that are here, whether it's, and I don't even mean it in a bad sense, because usually it's a wraparound. Usually they have some sort of person there that is realizing this kid has had a bad weekend. Instead of going to first hour, we're going to try to get some counseling in if they're
Exactly.
willing. That's the wraparound. But again, you never see that. And even us as board members, unless you're just really involved in the school, you don't always hear those
Right.
stories, because those stories take all day and they take away from the work that we need individuals to be doing in those spaces, as opposed to writing us books about, what's
Yeah.
happening every day in the school. But it's real.
It is.
It's
totally
real.
agree.
And we have to admit that it's there and that we've got to proactively do something about it.
Basically, it's our job, because we are supporting students and families. We were elected for this position, and we need to guarantee not only students and families, but our staff.
And without safety, my kid can't learn if they don't feel safe. The teachers can't teach effectively if they're thinking they have to look over their backs, in certain classes. It's a reality. So that's it for me.
I know Paul wants to move on, but I'm gonna say one thing. And I keep looking at Julie, because there are a lot of things that you guys don't know. And our Sunday nights and our Monday mornings are exactly what Tori described. And if we think that it's not gonna happen in Urbana, my friends in Champaign, my heart bleeds for the things that have been happening over there, and our new superintendent over there. Oh my gosh, what she has walked into. That can happen in Urbana any given day. And the reason that it doesn't is we have all of these adults who are working their butts off, doing nothing but prevention all day long. Principal Nance doesn't get to be a principal during the day as much as he would like to, because they're doing patrolling and supervision and trying to stay in front of just one more thing happening every single day. It's draining, it's exhausting. And if we don't do something, we're going to continue to lose good people, because it's so stressful right now. You guys just don't even imagine. You can't imagine.
And I just want to
what they're
interject
dealing
too,
with.
that part of that wraparound with board member Exum and board member Carter were saying is that Officer Burnett does have those insights and also those relationships with some of our kids who have had some of these biggest traumas. They go to him to confide in him and ask his help. So he's a key piece in that. I just want to recognize that.
Any other comments or questions? We have a long agenda left. Moving
Thank you,
on.
Kevin. We'll be in touch.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Good night. Administrative reports. First up is our 2020-2021 Auditors Report from Heather Powell, BKD LLP.
Everybody. Hi, hope you guys are doing well. I'm just gonna try to keep this as short and sweet as I can. Just wanted to hit on some highlights and go over just a few things related to the audit. We have completed everything. And as soon as it's approved, everything will be uploaded to the Illinois State Board of Education as it's required to be. So we will do that. We did issue our adverse opinion, which is for those of you that have been on the board previously, that's similar, the same opinion that you've received in the past. So no change there. Just a couple of highlights in the financial statements that were different this year that I wanted to point out. The district was required to adopt GASB statement number 84, which is around fiduciary activities. That really affects your student activity funds. So previously those were reported separately as fiduciary funds. They're now part of the education fund. So we have some different things within the financials, some disclosure about that, an emphasis of matter paragraph in the opinion, and then also they're broken out separately on the AFR. So you'll see that throughout the financial statements, and that was certainly something that was different this year. I just wanted to point that out. Really no other changes in the footnotes from last year. One other footnote that I wanted to mention is footnote 3. I think it's on page 15. We've been disclosing it for several years, but wanted to remind you that there is some tax money that's set aside as that's under appeal. And so we have that information included in the footnote as well, as that has not been settled yet. As far as the slides that I think hopefully are up on the screen, just wanted to run through a few things here. The first one is the fund balances. I know I'm sure this is really hard to read. I think you might have hard copies, but I'm not quite sure. Did see some increases in a few of the funds that I just wanted to mention. Capital Projects Fund obviously jumped. You had some bond issuances during the year, so those proceeds are included there. The Education Fund, I think a lot of this is attributed to some decreases in expenses this year with the remote learning. And then just the Operation and Maintenance Fund, just wanted to mention that that is still the largest of the negative fund balances, but that did show some improvement over last year. The next slide is what I was referring to just a minute ago with the expenses. This is just the Ed Fund expenses. And you can see that they were below budget by about 4 million. So some decreases in substitutes and some different things related to that remote learning. The next slide is on revenue. This is most of the revenue. This would not include capital projects funds, but this is most all the other revenue. And you'll see some fluctuations between the budget there. And we've talked about this for many years, but really the timing of your real estate tax payments does affect that local sources line. These are accrual basis statements. So we go out 60 days after year end and bring anything back that you've received in tax revenue back into this year, which is different than the way that's budgeted. That's just strictly on the cash basis. So that's what causes some of those fluctuations. And then with the federal sources, that's just differences in timing of payments, that you receive through the state for the federal funds. So. And then the last slide is just the working cash fund, cash balance. This, you can see it didn't fluctuate much. It really fluctuates with the interfund loans that the working cash fund makes to the other funds. And those remained relatively consistent at 5.4 million compared to 5.5 million last year. So that makes sense that this cash balance would stay about the same as well. Just a couple other things to mention really quickly. We did perform a single audit this year, which is over your federal funds. There were no findings related to that, and we did look at some of the new CARES Act funding. We also issued an audit committee letter, which is kind of outlines all of our required communications. But just to summarize a couple of things, there were no adjustments that we did not make. And the only adjustments that were made related to converting you from a cash basis statement to accrual basis statement. And there were no changes in your significant accounting policies either. We also issued a management letter, but there were no new exceptions or findings. So that's good news. They should look all similar to ones that maybe you've had in the past. And none of them are considered to be material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. So nothing that we would need to point out in regards to that. So that was all my prepared remarks. Certainly we'd like to thank the staff for all their help. The audit is a lot of work for all of them, I know. And so we really appreciate it. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you might have.
Board, are there any comments or questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you very much for hanging around, Heather.
No problem. Thank you.
I was going to introduce her, but and thank her, but you jumped right into it, Paul, so that's fine. But no, thanks for patience tonight, Heather, and sticking around till the end. So. She's gone already. Never mind.
Okay, I can't blame her. Second administrative report tonight is our 2021 Illinois School Report Card. Kim.
Okay, good evening. Tonight, I'm going to go over some highlights over our district report card that was just released last week. This definitely looks a lot different this year compared to years previously. Due to the limited in-person instruction last year, it has dramatically impacted report card metrics across the state for a second year. So overall, when you look at our highlights, there's some things that we can definitely take away from that. When we look at attendance, we can see that going from in-person to a partial year in 2020 with in-person and then remote, and then mostly remote last year. So even that there was variation from one year to the next, overall, our district average for attendance was 92%. Graduation rates held steady from previous years, and we are slightly higher than the state average with a four-year graduation rate of 87%. And when we look at a lot of other districts and comparable, we're looking pretty good with our 87% for our graduation rate. Advanced placement and CTE, this was a brand new metric this year, so information was not collected on that in previous years. But we have 29% of our students that are taking early college coursework. So that could be AP or dual credit. And we also have 743 students that were enrolled in at least one career and technical education course. Now, some of the significant impacts that we saw particularly were with assessments. So when you look at our Illinois Assessment for Readiness, our IER data, most of our students did not take that test. We had a low participation rate just due to the number of students that were not in person. Our ninth graders on track and eighth graders passing Algebra 1, the result of not being in person dramatically impacted student achievement in those areas. Now, typically, the state ISB will give us lots of guidance when the state report cards, the district report cards, and school report cards come out. We received very little this year. Typically, and if you remember from years past, I would explain the designations and the pie graph and how everything's calculated. Well, we just don't have those accountability pieces this year. So schools that were previously designated for improvement will maintain that status. There will be no new designations, but we will continue to be able to utilize support through either a lead partner or with our school improvement, our ESSER grant. So we will continue that, and I'll highlight further in just a moment. Now, we did complete the 5 essentials data, and you probably remember being hounded quite a bit as parents and for our students and our staff take that as well.
And the schools will get their 5 essentials data back, but because of the impact of COVID, we do not get results at the district level. So looking at our schools, again, these are our schools that were originally designated. So I included the years for their original designation and how that's changed. So typically when schools were originally designated, they would be in that status for 3 years and have those necessary supports and be working towards sustainability. So when you look at Urbana Middle School, they were originally designated in 2018. And they have targeted assistance. So that means on specific student groups. And this year, the funds that will be received are $32,240. And so typically it would be 2018, 19, and 20. So we have this year, and we will also get an additional year next year where we will receive funds. So we went from 3 years to 5 years due to the pandemic. DPW was designated in 2018, and so they are comprehensive, and that is focusing on all students, and they'll be receiving $74,658 with 1 additional year. Thomas Paine Elementary was designated a year later than our other schools, and they're targeted assistance, and they will receive $30,000 and then have an additional year, well, 2 years, since they were designated later. Yankee Ridge Elementary was designated in 2018 and our targeted assistance, and they received $20,000 and will have an additional year. And then Wiley was designated in 2018. They're comprehensive, focusing on all students, and will receive $65,000 for that additional year. And so just below just details the additional years that will be provided. Looking at our educator demographics, I thought this was an important piece to include. We're holding pretty steady there. When you look at all of our subgroups, it's been particularly hard, as you've known from conversations with the teacher shortage. So I did want to point out some things that HR is doing, and as well as our recruiter. So with that, the recruiter is working to retain staff with engaging staff with trivias, new teacher socials, and has attended and hosted recruitment fairs. So it's also important not only just to recruit, but we recognize the importance of retaining our staff as well. And then all of the mentoring support, our instructional coaches that are supporting our teachers as well. We've had retired teachers in classrooms, supporting teachers during this difficult time, lots of wraparound. Looking at our school finances, during the pandemic, enrollment was down due to the district being fully remote. The lower enrollment figures displayed here caused our expenditures per pupil to grow. So I'd like to focus on our low income students, even though we see the negative 10% there. We do have additional funding besides our district funding, besides our evidence-based funding that we've utilized to support students. So for example, we've used ESSER funds to combat the digital divide, to make sure our students had devices during the pandemic, to develop transition programs during summer school. Extended day is happening in all of our schools, and we're getting ready to kick that off. We kept pushing school supplies and having school supply drives throughout the pandemic, meal sites, hotspots. Also partnered to have buses that would provide Wi-Fi services in communities. And our teachers have been cross-planning. What was one positive during the pandemic was that in a particular grade level across the district, we could plan across the district because we had that capability when schedules were remote. That's a challenge now as we have new initiatives, and we're trying to be very creative with all the professional development and collaboration. but that was definitely so. And there was a concerted effort reaching out to students that were not engaged. And I think that helped on our attendance percentages, even though we definitely had our sets of challenges and we know we had students that didn't engage. But as I think one common denominator we can take away tonight is that not everything, again, is always quantifiable. I think that's repeatedly been said tonight, but it's just having that outreach with students, the collaboration, the support, and not all of our efforts are always tangible. So next steps, our schools, as I mentioned, will be offering extended day learning, and that is in every single school. Our designated schools that I mentioned will have resources available and professional development, and that all of that must be aligned to their SIP goals. So we're closely monitored on that piece. So anything that we are spending those funds for have to be directly tied to their school improvement goals. Our schools are reviewing and revising their action plans quarterly. We offer comprehensive new teacher mentoring through an induction program. And the district is dedicated to aligning our resources to support and look at multiple indicators, which we've talked about tonight with the equity audit, or as we're rolling out 5 labs, we understand the importance of looking at through multiple lenses and looking at all these indicators. And SEL support and meeting the needs of the whole child will continue to be a priority. Any questions about that? No, that's a quick overview.
I have 2 questions. One, on that second to last slide where it says English learners 19.6%, is that meaning English as a second language? Or people learning in English? That seems low.
That would be, a portion of our evidence-based funds.
Yeah, the heading for English learners.
I think they changed the wording several
Yeah,
years
it's
ago.
English. It used to be English language learners and it's English learners. Yes.
Yes, exactly. All right. Then another question.
Mhm.
On the, the 5 or 6 schools that have designations. So this year and last year, those just got carried over, right? So were they supposed to be just like 2-year terms for that designation, or is it just,
It originally was a 3-year term.
yeah,
And then due to the pandemic, so let's just take Urbana Middle School, for example. So that should have been a 3-year term, but then we have this year that was added, and we'll have next year as well.
no, so it should really go 5 years then from 2018.
Correct.
So, all right. When you say 1 year remaining, it's next school year.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, 1 year after this year.
Did any of our schools, did they move any schools down or anything like that or not because of the COVID?
There's too many things. When you look at our district report card or the school report cards, pretty much everything will say impacted by COVID. So
Okay.
even though I want to highlight our attendance, it's just not a variable, you can't compare
Right.
regular in-person every single day to virtual learning.
Right.
And
Could you
everything's-
go over what target comprehensive, the difference between those two? are?
Sure. So targeted would be that you are focusing on all of your student groups, where comprehensive would be specific student groups that would have been, I'm sorry, other way around. I'm just too tired. So targeted, excuse me. So targeted would be, specific student groups. So it could
Okay.
be students with IEPs, or it could be our Black students, or our, yeah. And then comprehensive would be all students. Because we had every student group that didn't make the necessary progress that they needed to.
Thank you.
I had a question about the funding. I'm glad that the money's rolling over. But I think one of the I mean, it's obvious why they didn't want to give us report cards based on our progress, quote unquote, progress during the pandemic, because they didn't want people to feel penalized. But I think the downside of that is that, are we getting a true picture of just how much damage we've suffered? And can we quantify that kind of, I mean, our district with so many free and reduced lunch students, I mean, this is really not a question, it's just a statement, but we're, you know, a unique district with the level of free and reduced lunch students we have, or families without internet connection. And that's something that gets impacted by COVID in different ways from other districts. And so I wish we could, are we tracking that kind of data, not because we want to penalize anybody, but because we want to recruit additional resources, because these are going to have long-term knock-on effects to us. They are to everybody, but our problems are unique to us. And so I want to know, I would like to know that the state recognizes that when they're dispersing these funds to us, that we can target it in ways. And I appreciate that we're getting the ESSER funding, that we have a wide discretionary limit to how we use it. And I remember asking a while back, and could you reiterate from the last time I asked this question, maybe it was 2 years ago, when we get money for the EBF for these schools that are either targeted or comprehensive in certain dollar amounts, do they tell us, do we get a choice how we use that money? How is it spent? And can you remind us again how we show what we're doing with the money and how it is going to benefit our students?
So there's what, Carol, 26 different indicators that we look at with evidence-based funding. I mean,
It's like, this is, so that's not.
Yeah, so Anne, I think.
oh, I
you're
thought she
mixing up-
was asking. about
I mean, we
evidence-based.
do have additional money from ESSER, which is great,
Oh,
but we still have the evidence-based funding money. So
Right.
can we combine the two, or do we have to keep them separate and show our work, quote unquote, as to how we're using it to benefit the kids, to bring them
It
up?
is separate. So for ESSER funds, we have to specifically use those funds on those key areas that are in the school improvement plan, or when you look at the targeted areas that were identified, we're required to use the funds in those areas.
So, but could that take the form of, say, you know, paying for additional staff, paying for an additional teacher, or a math or language literacy aide who can help? Can we use ESSER money for that, or do we have to rely on the evidence-based funding money for that? Can we combine them? You know, for staff and materials for that particular thing, not for internet connectivity or for funding for new structures to keep social distancing, but just strictly on personnel that can help us bring our students' learning up.
And they do that. I think like Wiley, for example, she last year used some of her comprehensive money, and was it math and literacy? She brought an additional person in for so many hours to
Mhm.
work with targeted groups of students.
Mhm.
And then she does the reading rally program after school. And
Right.
reading rally is for everyone, and it is an academic focused
Mhm.
program. So,
Mhm.
Now,
so I
what-
think they supplement, but they're not meant to supplant. Like, we can't take two Wiley teachers. We can't take a teacher out of our ed fund and now use her $65,000 to pay for one of her classroom teachers. I think is kind of what
Yeah.
you're asking. Yes.
Okay.
So-
Okay.
So no, we cannot do that.
And so the funds, so for example, and we'll just look at Wiley, because right now it's $65,000 for this year.
Mhm.
And it was $100,000 that they had the year previous, you know,
Okay.
last year. And so as we are weaning off of our ESSER money, we also have to look at sustainability.
Mhm.
So that when I said that there's some specific things that we have to focus on with ESSER funds, we also are required to use a certain percentage for professional development. So there's a certain percentages and there's a certain focus with those funds. And so when we look at that, we also have to work towards sustainability,
Mhm.
because we can't always have, if it's a human resource, we wouldn't want to use all of the funds for a human resource, and we
Mhm.
have to have the professional developments, and when we're looking at the total amount, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
All right, any further questions? All right, then, thank you very much. Our board discussion tonight is on sub-districts redistricting. So I think John's got a presentation for us.
Yep. And so if you guys like maps and block level census data as much as me, I think you're all in for a real treat. And if not, I'll try to go quickly and make this as painless as possible. I wanted to start out with looking at our existing district maps. So you have these all in your packet. These first or the last few maps of the packet highlight kind of the changes in our demographics over the past 10 years. Every 10 years, we have our federally constitutionally mandated census. So these I'll let you look at your leisure, but a few items of note from these. Whereas before there was not really a discernible area where there was a concentration of Hispanic population. This year, there are a few areas where there are higher concentrations of Hispanic population within the district. And then the other thing is some of our, zoom out just a little bit here, areas that had higher concentrations of certain demographics have shifted kind of from one area to another, and some of them have changed kind of substantially over the last 10 years. The net result of this has been that areas where we had targeted districts 10 years ago, due to changing census numbers in those areas, have not met the goals that the board was making 10 years ago. So I'm going to go into a little bit of the redistricting process. And I think you guys have all seen this was the set of criteria that we talked about at the last meeting. So I'm going to step through these criteria really quickly and just kind of go over how they're going to affect the process moving forward. And then when we're done, I'll give you a brief tutorial of the tool that we have available for anybody to use, including community members. So the first one is that the subdistricts are substantially equal in population based on that should be 2020 census, I think, right? Okay. So if we look at our existing map, in the upper right-hand corner, so this is a map that was provided by the Champaign County GIS Consortium, and this has a lot of valuable data. As we have other maps, they've agreed that they'll be able to evaluate other maps in a similar way. So as we look, we have 7 subdistricts, and the average number of population per subdistrict should be 6277. As things have shifted over the past year, we have some now in the 5400s and some in the 6600s. Some of this is due to when the time of the census happened, there was less students on campus, which carves out a portion of the west side of our district. Other things, as we mentioned, is just changing demographics. So one of the processes as we're evaluating these is to make sure that those are as close to parity as possible. The second one is that the districts all be contiguous. That's pretty much self-explanatory. You can't have districts on opposite sides, sub-districts on opposite sides of the district. The third one, as I was going in here, is compactness. And again, the consortium provides us with a couple tools to measure compactness, and I'll go over those really quickly. The first one, the Polsby-Popper basis for compactness, takes the area of a subdistrict and divides it by the perimeter. and takes it times 4 pi, just so that it's a number between 0 and 1. So this is great for making sure you don't have districts that are really long and narrow, but does not help as well for districts like our eastern border, where due to things that happened a long time before any of us were here, you got kind of these puzzle piece district areas. So it's great for the square districts at the bottom, not as good for the ones with intricate borders at the top. It doesn't give a very good realistic measure because those have such long perimeters in those short areas. The second one is the REOC area, is the area of your subdistrict divided by the area of the smallest circle that would completely inscribe your subdistrict. So this again is good for District 1 up at the top is kind of like a circle. So it would be a fairly similar size circle that would encapsulate it. If you get some of the longer, narrower ones, it's a much bigger circle that encapsulates those. The last one is the, I'm going to mispronounce this, Ehrenberg analysis, which this takes, it's kind of the opposite of the previous one, where you have the largest inscribed circle that would fit anywhere in the district divided by the area of the district. So for that one, especially very skinny districts like this one, you can see District 3, there's not a big circle that you could fit in there, and it is a little bit longer and narrower, although it doesn't have as big of a parameter or a perimeter because it's a straight square on all the sides. So again, the GIS consortium will help us with evaluating those, and you as a board can kind of evaluate which are all of the tools you want to evaluate compactness with. One of the more important ones is making sure that it maintains a minority balance in compliance with the Voter Rights Act. The Section 2 of the Voters' Rights Act protects voters from discrimination based on race, color, or membership in a minority language group. And this includes minority vote dilution, which is commonly referred as gerrymandering. So for our district, while we have not done anything intentionally, in fact, I think we've been working very hard to make sure that we are not doing that. Over the period of the last 10 years, due to changes in demographics, we have gone from trying to have at least 2 majority minority districts to now we have 6 of our districts are majority white districts and only 1 majority minority. Based on the new census numbers for this year, I don't know if you can see at the bottom. Can you guys see this line here? Okay. Or is that too small? I can make it a little bigger. So as we shifted to this year, there are within the district, based on population from the census, there are 52% white residents. I believe that's 17.9% Black residents, smaller numbers of American Indian, 15% Asian, and then 10% Hispanic residents. So based on those numbers, the number of board seats, if you just multiply those percentages times 7, you would end up with 3.5 white board members, 1.25 Black, and then you can see there, I can't see at that angle, 1.6 Asian and 0.7 Hispanic. This does vary, as we just got our latest school report card data. This does vary greatly, particularly because of the campus population from our actual student population. So in this bottom row, you can see this is based on our student population, where it is starkly different numbers. For the redistricting, we are looking at census data as required, but this is also something that we can consider. And this, it's even starkly different. 2 white board members, 2.6 black board members, and then 1.2 Hispanic board members would be what the makeup of the board would look like if it was representing our student population. So this is our reality right now. This is our truth of how we need to move forward and make sure that there's not a minority dilution of representation as we work to redistrict these board districts. And I'll go over the process of how you can kind of change the maps to make that look in just a second here. And one last thing, and this is on a slightly different map that I will pull up here, and I will include this link as well, is having equal distribution of university students in the subdistricts. The intent of this is so that since university students are not always as committed to school board elections, that they kind of distribute that evenly among the districts. So this is a map of the university zone. And so as we had the districts in the past, there were kind of chunks taken out of that university zone for various districts along the western side of the school district. And so that is something that we can look to maintain as we also go to change maps this year. So right now I'm going to pull up the map tool. We had a lot of presentations tonight. This is the Dave's redistricting map application. And I'm going to show you guys really quickly how to create a new map. And one other important thing I almost forgot to mention, there's also the direct census data map provides a lot better kind of comprehensive map of where the current racial breakdown of the district is across the district. But I'm going to jump in here. So in this app, this is one that I've been playing with earlier. If you go to your maps section, there's a link in the instructions to do this, and the link takes you to our existing map as it is. Once you get to there, this is our existing district map. You can select that and hit duplicate, and that will give you a new map in just about 15 seconds. You can take that new map and you should probably rename it. You can name it with your name or with a criteria that you're trying to meet. It's important to rename it because eventually this will be getting submitted back to the board for evaluation. So you can double click to open your new map, and this brings you into the current district map. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. So there's a few important things here. On the left side, this is the sub-districts. Those are what you select to add or remove blocks from the district. And then at the bottom, there is the attendance area map. So if you click on this one, this has all of the attendance areas, which is the last criteria that the board agreed to evaluate things on. So these are the kind of darker black lines on here. If you don't know which schools correspond to which attendance areas, there's a different colored map on the website that's available that helps you kind of fill in those. It's really difficult to look at 2 layers of color at the same time. So this also gives us the current population for each district. So if you recall, we were trying to get those to 5277 plus or minus a little bit. So if we look at one, it looks like the district here is a little bit smaller. So if we zoom in here, you can scroll around the map with the hand tool that lets you drag and scroll. And then if you want to change a map, so we will add blocks to the yellow map and we'll go click on block data at the top. You can either double click or you can use the paintbrush tool. And so now we're on the paintbrush tool. Once we get in here, it will give us the individual blocks. And each block, as you can see there, you can label with, you can choose labels from these set of labels, any 3 at a time. It's really helpful to always have the total population on, because if you're trying to add 200 to one district and subtract 200 from another district, it's helpful to see if you're adding 57 or 257 to the other district. I also chose white and black, so you could see how that's going to affect the racial makeup of that district as we're trying to get to a better balance for the district. So then as you click those, it will automatically update all of the statistics, including the totals for all the districts. And then for the selected district, it will give you the breakdown of all of the other criteria that you're trying to evaluate. So when you're done with that, there's this check mark on the side. It's important to click that check mark that locks in your data. So that's saved. And then you can go do some more statistics and analysis of all your districts up here. When you're completely done, you can go to the share tool up at the top, and this will give you a link. You can copy that link and email that to contact us at usd116.org. Again, all of this is in the instruction PDF that we had provided, but I just wanted to walk you guys through that to make sure that everything was clear. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So this doesn't have the ability for us to plug what we're wanting, what we're looking for, and say create, does it? Is it more of a?
It does not. This is kind of a hand tool. There are some tools that we don't have within the county that do that. We also, as a district, got, so there's about, I'd have to look it up, there's about 600 different blocks in the district, and each block has its own demographic data. So we have all of the block level data in a tabular format that'll let us do some things algorithmically. It's a little complicated because of adjacencies and how things are kind of laid out to keep it compact and contiguous. But that's something else we're doing within the district. And that's something that we'll have for you guys to evaluate as well.
With that data that you're talking about, would that actually have the number of students in our sub-district? Because I know some sub-districts might not have that many elementary students anymore, but they could have a lot of people. So
that is a great question.
Thank you.
This tool does not have that information at all. This is based just on census data. So it does have, you can do things by age, but you can't do them by students.
Okay.
But the district has just as of about 6 hours ago, about 9 hours ago, it's been a long day. We have just gotten set up with 5 Maps, which is a data analysis tool that this is for census data and residents. We have 5 Maps is a tool that allows us to analyze data in a really similar fashion. It's actually a lot easier for our student population, including you can do things like SPED population, ESL, free reduced lunch, basically everything that we have in our student information system. we can do some in-depth analysis in district of where those things are. That is not something, that is something that we can use as a consideration, but that is not one of the
Primary things,
criteria
okay.
for evaluating board election districts.
Okay.
But that is something that we can also look at in the future as we're looking to balance out schools and make things more equitable in the district. And really hope we can leverage that as we start to deep dive into our equity work in the next year.
Okay, thank you.
So that button that says USD 116 attendance, that just pulls up the area of the elementary districts as an overlay, or what does that button do again?
That is, here, I'll scroll out. So that is the lines of the attendance areas, as criteria 7 was that each board district would contain at least 2 areas of attendance areas. So if you're in District 5, or I'm just making up numbers here, if you're in District 5, you would at least have the attendance area of Wiley and Leal. Or if you're in District 1, you would at least have the attendance area of
All the
King and
schools.
DPW. Yeah. So-
Seriously, I have all the elementary
Yes.
schools in my
And
district.
the way things are chopped up right now, it's actually, that is not a difficult criteria to meet. It's actually kind of hard not to have multiple schools represented for each district. But that was just to aid in making sure that that criteria was met.
I asked because at the last meeting, you had mentioned, I think what Brenda was asking, and that is about using the district data to plug in so you could see what the student demographic difference is between the sub-districts. So.
Yeah, that is something.
You'd have to
we-
apply in a secondary thing, I guess.
Yeah, that's something we have. It's not included in here. And I don't think we could include that as an overlay from GIS, but I can check. I think they're just using the census data.
Well, it could be something that if you have like top 3 contenders for choosing, then we could just do it to those 3 to help decide potentially if that's what one person is going to use to sway them one way or another.
Yeah,
You
that
know?
would be valuable information and something we can do.
I was going to make a comment about these maps as well. And so you had put up the percent Black 2010 versus 2020 as an example when you're making the comment about there, you notice some demographics moving areas or being more concentrated in areas other than before. And when I looked at that, you know, there's this, if you look at the 2020, there's this void north of Main Street and south of Perkins and the lower edge of District 1 or Sub-District 1. It's actually blank in all the demographics. So, I mean, it's just a sign that the census data was not robustly collected in all areas. You know, if you look at the white one, it's all empty there. Same with Hispanic and Asian. I looked at my map on my cell phone. There's definitely houses there.
Yeah.
So,
You're right.
I mean, it's just a sign that what a lot of people are fearing with the census is that we're missing a lot of people.
No.
So,
Yeah, which is, I think, a good
Thousands.
point. It's important to make sure people are contributing to the census because it does inform decisions for entities across the state.
yes,
So,
but that cannot be corrected for 10 years.
nope.
No, this is what we're stuck with. All right. Is there any more discussion about these specific mapping tools? Because I like to kind of move on. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I think I've 2 questions as we're thinking about this. One is, what is our tolerance on equity of size? Is there actually a parameter given some of the big sways in population, or we just decide what equal population means in our
I
interpretation?
think we need to get it as close to that median as possible.
I think the goal, according to the JS consortium, was as small as possible. So I think you guys can decide what's reasonable, but
I mean, we could look
Probably-
how far off we were in terms of percentages the last time around as a guide, but
yeah. And as you're doing this, variances of 50, like there's a lot of blocks that have 50 or 90 people in them. So it's hard to getting it within like 30 or 50 is really, really good. Especially when you're trying to keep things that make sense.
Right. I mean, part of this is the observation that District 4 and District 5 have lost a ton of people. And those are already districts we tend to hear a lot from. And I fear slightly that our criteria now is we're going to have to expand those districts to give a larger area to, because there were no students in there. I mean, I think our hands are tied on that.
Hey.
But just an observation, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, it cuts both ways though. By increasing the size of those sub-districts in eastward, we're probably adding more voters to them.
True.
Is there any more questions or comments for John? Because I'd like to move on to discuss kind of the process going forward with regards to map submission, evaluation, and approval. So I think we should, makes sense, I think, to work backwards from a goal date by which we would want to approve a map. So last time around, I believe we approved a map in December. It was at the first or second meeting, the second meeting in December, which still gave the county plenty of time, more than enough time, really. So if we use that as a guide for this time around, when would we want to have potential maps submitted by, and what would how much time would we need to evaluate them? Yeah. So if we wanted to target basically approving a map on December 15th, or 14th. On December 14th, then when we would want to have maps submitted by? I would think we should probably discuss them on the prior meeting a little bit before we approve.
Yeah, I do too. Also, the community will need time.
So I'm starting to wonder if we have enough time to do all this.
We can ask this. I didn't think it was the 14th. I thought it was the 21st.
But that's winter break, right?
We're on winter break.
We're on winter break.
Well, it's not always first and third. We move them
7th and
7th, 14th.
So the filing date for the next election is like December of 2022.
Yes,
right?
we have plenty of time for that.
So how much time do they need? Like, can we do it by February? Be fine,
And maybe that's a county clerk question.
Yeah.
That I can check with Mr. Ammons on.
Okay. I wouldn't think so. Now, if we're doing this as a group, right?
I'll check with Mr. Ammons.
Okay.
It's going to take a few weeks just to propose a single map. And then probably a few more weeks to say, well, this is how you do it better,
Yeah, I agree.
And then it'll take a few weeks to study the map,
And the difference.
I think it's maybe a 3-month process.
The difference before is the census data is way delayed. Back in 2010, I think they probably got it in July or August and had so much more time with it. I'll have to check though to make sure that we're not under certain rules of when we have to have it done, kind of like our legislators. They have to have.
I don't wanna rush this process.
Yeah, there might be state law involved.
There might be some school
Right.
code, state law involved. So I'll check with Mr. Ammons and Dennis. I think Dennis would be another person who would know.
Okay.
I think too, that way it would give the community time to do their maps and send it in to us so we can take a look and be very thorough in what we're doing. So.
Well, if it ends up being mandated, we have to do it this calendar year, then I think we'd have to
I
expect
thought
to
it was
have.
this calendar year, but I will, because the census data was so late, and we still don't even have all of it. They still don't have, they don't have age and certain other pieces not included, so maybe they're giving some concessions, but
No.
I would hope.
Okay, well, then I guess we'd kind of wait on that information before we can kind of set a timeline.
But that doesn't mean people can't start submitting. I mean,
Absolutely not.
John has created these little screenshots, so hopefully people watching can download those. Those were in our packet. And watch the YouTube, because
And that PDF file should be put on our website.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, is it on the web for people to go to?
They were in the
If-
packet, so yeah, they should be in the Google Drive.
Okay.
This information. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
I'd promote putting a link on the thing, because like when you go through the board meeting and look through that,
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
you lose interest and then you click
You
on
mean a
something
link
else.
to
We could probably make like a little
Oh,
whole
sure. Like a
redistricting
little icon.
subpage
Yeah.
that also
sure.
kind of describes, because that's just the instructions. That doesn't have
you to
the
the app.
evaluation criteria,
Mhm.
or the criteria in there, but not really any explanation of them.
You can have a deep link to this YouTube video.
I was gonna say to the YouTube video. So John, let me ask, I know what we're seeing when we look at the screen, when people, what are people at home? Were people at home seeing the TV, or were they seeing us, or?
It sounds like she had our presentation up for most
Okay,
of the time.
perfect. So when
So
people-
usually they cut back and forth. They do a great job
Oh,
at
perfect.
UCTV.
Thank you. So when people are watching the video, they will see your step by step. So perfect.
So yeah, we could just deep link to this portion of this meeting when it's up on YouTube, and that'll help
Mm-hmm.
too.
So is this something that'll go out like in a superintendent's report, or
So
how do
Catherine,
we?
I texted Catherine and told her to go home because she's got two
Oh,
little kids. So she's
okay.
gone. So what she and I talked about doing, well, she does her board updates.
Okay,
So
yeah.
she'll put those out in the next day or two. And we also talked about doing one of the pop-ups. So when you go to our website for a week or two, or however long we decide, you'll get a pop-up. And we could put the link in the pop-up, I would think too.
Okay.
Um,
All right.
So-
So then I guess be prepared at our next meeting to discuss a timetable.
And some potential, when you get in and play with this, if there's some maps, because the GIS folks will make whatever they'll create maps for us and have them printed, and we can have them ready to look at if you have some that you want to explore right away. We just have to give them the parameters and they will make the maps for us.
I think they said a reasonable number.
Sure, a reasonable number, yeah.
I think we can whittle it down. Are there any other comments or questions, discussion points? Okay, great. Hearing none. Thank you very much, John. There will be a special executive, 2 executive meetings tomorrow for student discipline. Superintendent's report.
All right, John, you took the clicker, so you can click for me. We can click super fast. It's late. Okay, vaccination clinic. So we had about 415 people who expressed interest, and as of earlier today, I think we had 313 or 40 or something like that.
I
that
think
have-
even removing the duplicates, I think it was around 365.
that have already signed up, and I just sent it out last night at like 6:30. So that's amazing. So we'll keep promoting that. We are in desperate need of nurses. So if you're a nurse and you're listening to this or you're watching the YouTube video, please contact our school district so we can get you signed up to help us with our vaccine clinic. I have had a couple people reach out to me via email and ask about the second dose. So technically you cannot give the second dose prior to 3 weeks before. 3 weeks, there has to be a 3-week window in between. And 3 weeks is actually the Friday after Thanksgiving. So we're not expecting folks to come in for their second dose the Friday after Thanksgiving. We are going to be offering the second dose either December 3rd and 4th. But again, because those are student attendance days, we would have to do those after school. We might have to do a Saturday in order to be able to get in 450 people. So we will be looking for some nursing support for that. CU Public Health District is not able to help us on Friday because they have their own clinic that they're going to be running. So I think we're going to be okay. We're getting a lot of people willing to support and help us. So we're super excited about this. I know several of our board members right here who have elementary age students are very excited as well. So
Sorry to interrupt, but were you able to find out if this is just for Urbana students?
this is for Urbana students. I did
Okay.
have a couple of people who live in Urbana who their students go to private schools. So right now we are prioritizing for Urbana youth. If we have enough vaccine and we're able to accommodate other people from our community, we will do that. But right now the priority is to get as many of our own elementary students in as possible.
Has there been any thought, or what are we doing about our teachers and staff and all of the individuals who got their initial doses back in February? Are we directing them to the different?
boosters?
Yeah,
Oh,
so are
we've
we
been
looking at
promoting that, yes. So we were initially going to do a booster clinic, but because we wanted to kind of reserve quickly, we knew CPHD has been keeping me abreast of everything. So I knew that the approval was coming and I didn't want to overtax our nursing staff. So instead of trying to do a booster a couple weeks ago and then turning around and doing this, we have been directing our staff to all the places in the community. So people have been going to CVS,
Okay.
Walgreens, iHotel, Kohl's, the Carl site. So people have been getting their boosters. So
Okay.
we've been
I
really
just wanna make sure
advertising
that
it. And yep, we've
messaging
been
had
making
went
sure that
out and-
messaging, I've messaged it several times.
And I think they dropped the pre-existing conditions today,
Mhm.
so that
Yep.
opens it up
Yep.
to
Yep.
lots.
18 or over, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we have our next Parent Academy, Tuesday, November 9th. So there are a lot of emails that have been going on about this. We were continuing Zoom sessions, but we were also offering an in-person session. So Mrs. Webster has been sharing that pretty widely. So look forward to that. Student ambassadors, we talked about this earlier. I don't need to say much about it, except students get your applications in by Friday at noon. Calendar change, we have been putting this information out as well, that the 22nd and 23rd, the Monday and Tuesday before Thanksgiving are now asynchronous work days for early childhood through 7th grade and e-learning days for 8 through 12. We were hoping that this slide was going to say that our UHS boys soccer team was moving to finals, but we are so proud of them. They were, the score was 0-0 and they lost in a shootout tonight, but they should be so proud of themselves. We are so proud of them. They just had an amazing season. So congratulations to UHS boys soccer. That is from Saturday when they won the sectional in Bloomington. So cross country on Saturday also had a phenomenal day. Our boys cross country team placed 4th, their first time qualifying for state in 50 years. So their meet is this Saturday in Peoria. I don't have the time yet, but Brian, do you know the time? Does anybody know? You don't know? Yeah, I don't know what time. Celia, congratulations to her. Celia has qualified on the girls team and 3rd time in her high school career. So congratulations to Celia. Friday, November 5th is a staff development day. Remember, our elementary students do not attend on those dates, so families are aware of that. Hopefully, UMS and UHS have early dismissal, and then of course we have Thanksgiving break. That is it. We have no FOIAs.
Any board reports tonight? All right, hearing none.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I was going to try to slip this in the casual conversation during the equity talk, but I didn't have the opportunity. I was going to say that, on the Cunningham Township Supervisor's Facebook page, they put up a post today that said 163 homes in Urbana are going to lose power either today or tomorrow. So that will, I don't know if they have students or not, but that definitely affects things like that. So it's just a thing to keep in mind with the community we live in.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Good night, everybody.